Good evening, one and all. It's the Drinker here, and we're on happy hour number 42 now. Jeez, they're really going up there. But I am joined this evening by the one and only History Bro. Works with Sargon on the Lotus Eaters podcast. He was nice enough to have me on his stream. Gosh, it was a few months back, and we did a talk about Waterloo. It's one of my favorite old movies. Yeah, and it's been great to have you back, man. Like, we're going to be doing a bit of a chat here about our favorite war movies of all time. And I thought you were a great guy to bring on for this sort of thing because, man, you know your stuff when it comes to history. So, how are you doing, mate? Thank you for coming on as well.
Oh, well, no, thank you for having me on. It's a real treat, an honour and a pleasure. Yeah, no, that's very kind of you to say. Hopefully I can do some of these films a bit of justice. We shall see. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. As I said just before we came on air, the opportunity just to babble about history and war films, it's sort of a dream come true for me. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
Nice one. So yeah, I mean, the way that I thought we could do this, because we've both come up with our list of like top 5 favorite war movies, and neither of us knows what the other one's picked. And I thought easiest way to do it is just we go one at a time, and each person can introduce their next favorite, and we can chat a little bit about each film as we go. And then I guess you save your top pick for the end, and we'll see where we come out. And chat, by all means, follow us. I mean, I'm quite conscious that this is going to be a contentious one, and whatever we pick, there's going to be about 1,000 people screaming at us like, "No, why did you pick that? Why did you leave this one out?" So damn, yeah, we'll just do our best. And like, I think for me, the ones that I've picked are kind of my personal favorites, and I'm not going to sit here and say, this is definitively the greatest war movies ever made or anything, but it's just the ones that I very much enjoy watching. I don't know how it is for you, man.
Yeah, well, I actually did spend a bit of time trying to pick out my top 5, and there's loads you have to cut out, obviously. Brilliant films that I absolutely love, but they just couldn't make, 5 is quite a small number to pick.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can't even put them in a necessary order of the top 5. Like when people say, "What's your favorite song of all time? What's your favorite?"
Yeah, like how do you pick one?
What mood I'm in,
Yeah. No, I mean, I've tried to put them in an order. So I mean, I'll go with that. I'll probably I ended up scrubbing the list and starting again like several times because, like we were saying, there's just so many. And I should say, because we were discussing this before, I think both of us have probably got some honorable mentions that didn't quite make the list, but they were just awesome movies. Like just a cursory thing, I've got like The Longest Day, The Enemy Below, Das Boot, Enemy at the Gates, The Bridge on the River Kwai, Full Metal Jacket, like all just awesome movies, and all that films that I think are fantastic. They just didn't quite make my top 5.
Yeah, it's funny. I had Full Metal Jacket in the list that just didn't, and Das Boot just didn't make the cut.
Yeah,
Patton. I love the film Patton, but it just didn't quite make it. But there's loads all quite on the Western Front. Well, if we hadn't have already talked about Waterloo, I would have picked Waterloo.
So we did talk about that, didn't we?
To deliberately leave that one off so I can get more chat with you about other films. But that would have made my top 5.
Yeah, I would have said so as well. And when I was picking my top 5 as well, I tried to have a bit of variety there. So rather than just have, say, all conventional World War II movies or whatever, I tried to spread it out a little bit. So there's different time periods covered and stuff like that. I'm just looking through chat as well. Hamburger Hill is a great Vietnam movie. I remember that one as being really good. Someone said Aliens is a war movie. Absolutely.
Well, that's the other thing, because there's a few picks. Could I pick Empire Strikes Back? I have,
yeah. It's war and star in the stars. So yeah, I suppose so. Zulu's another great one. Yeah, fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Zulu's on my list of the ones that just didn't make the cut. Yeah, Tora.
Oh yeah.
And Battle of Britain was the other one that
Yes.
in fact, it was on my list, Battle of Britain, because I love a bit of Michael Caine and Lovejoy.
Yes.
But just didn't make the list. I've got, not to give too much away, I've got 2 World War Twos, 1 World War One, 1 Vietnam, and Napoleonic era one.
Okay.
So.
I've got like 3 World War II. So I was quite World War II heavy, and I wish I hadn't been quite so much. But they were just favorites of mine. I've got 1 Vietnam one, and I've got 1 like more modern one. So I guess that's where I've got so far. Yeah, I don't know. Like, should we introduce our first ones and see where we
go ahead. Do you want to go first?
Okay, so people that have watched my second channel may have guessed this one, but my number 5 pick was Where Eagles Dare, which is just a great it's kind of like a combination World War II movie and kind of spy espionage film. I just think it's brilliantly shot. It's so atmospheric. It's like a team of special forces guys that have been parachuted in behind enemy lines in the Austrian Alps because an American general has been shot down and captured, and he's got the plans for the D-Day invasion, so they have to rescue him. But as they make their way towards this castle where he's being held, which is just straight out of a fucking like cartoon or something, it's like this massive fortress up on a mountaintop. There's a guy within their team that's working against them and starts killing them off. And it's got Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood together in the same movie. Just fantastic. And the thing I love as well is that the climax of the film, where they manage to infiltrate this castle and get into where the general's being held. And it just becomes this incredible game of subterfuge and like bluffing. And you find out that the real purpose of their mission isn't to rescue this general. He's just a decoy. He's not even a real general. He's just an actor. But what they really want is the details of these German spies who've actually infiltrated MI6. And so they were able to bluff their way into getting this information. It's just an incredible scene, the way Richard Burton's character plays it out. But it's also got, when it comes to like the escape scene from the place, they've got all the action. You've got Clint Eastwood dual wielding MP45s to mow down a platoon of German soldiers. Like, it's just brilliant combination of action and intrigue. I love Where Eagles Dare, and it's got a kick-ass theme tune as well.
Yeah, it's a very young Clint Eastwood, isn't it? And Burton is great. I've only seen that film a couple of times ever, and only just on TV. I never sort of owned it. And I only saw it for the first time when I was quite old. I was already in my 20s or early 30s, so it wasn't one I sort of grew up with, where a lot of my picks are. But yeah, it's a great film. Richard Burton is a powerful actor, isn't he? Very, very powerful. I think like millennials wouldn't really know him very well, but he's he dominates most scenes he's in, don't you think?
Absolutely, because he's not a big guy. He's not a physically imposing guy. Like Clint Eastwood kind of towers over him, but he's just got that kind of magnetism about him. Likes a drink as well, or he did anyway when he was alive. And yeah, apparently he disappeared with like Richard Harris and I think Peter O'Toole in the middle of shooting this film. He went off on a bender for like an entire week. And nobody had any clue where he'd gone. And they were like, shit, is he even going to come back? Is he alive? Like, we don't know.
With Richard Harris?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Because he's similar. If anything, he's sort of more of a presence than Burton, if that's possible. Like,
yeah, well, that's the thing. Like,
actor,
So Burton went off with Richard Harris and Peter O'Toole. Like, the three of them were on a bender, like, somewhere in Europe. I think to this day, nobody quite knows where the hell they were. But yeah, like he was drunk throughout much of the production of Where Eagles Dare, but somehow he managed to play a sober guy. So shows how good of an actor he was.
I remember there's a bit in that film where I think it's Richard Burton uses a radio to call London from the Alps. Calling Danny Boy or something.
Yeah, broadsword like, calling Danny Boy.
That's not possible. You couldn't do that in the 40s. That's just pure nonsense. But no, it's a great film from what I remember. But yeah, it's just one of those ones that I didn't grow up with. Didn't have it in like my VHS collection in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up. So I don't know it really, really inside out. But yeah, I do remember it's quite tense. Aren't there loads of scenes in it where it's just really, really tense?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's able to switch from that kind of slow burn of them like sneaking around. They have to infiltrate the village that's below this castle, so they can then get on like a cable car thing. That's the only way to access this place.
Yeah, that's the
And they kind of bluff their way in as German officers. And so you've got all of that stuff going on while there's someone within their team that's working against them and killing them off. And yeah, it's all shot on location in like the Austrian Alps, so it's in the middle of winter. There's like deep snow everywhere. It's always dark, and like the atmosphere is really kind of oppressive and claustrophobic. But the cinematography and everything just matches exactly what's going on in the plot. I think it's just a really well directed, really well shot, and really well acted movie. And it's even got strong female characters, which everyone loves these days. But yeah, there was two women in this who are like working undercover as spies that kind of accompany the team. Like one's working in a tavern in the village. She's posing as a German. The other one's like part of the team, but most of them aren't aware that she's there. She's kind of shadowing them. And yeah, like when it comes time to fight their way out of the castle, like they're both capable of running and gunning just like the chaps are. And I think, yeah, that was back in the 60s. They were doing that. Who knew?
Yeah, I remember. You see Clint Eastwood in a Nazi uniform for a lot of it. I'm getting snapshots of memory. Is that right?
Yes, because that's what I mean. They kind of posed as German officers so they could move through the village and try and make their way into the castle. And there's a bit where I think like a German officer insults Richard Burton, and then he asks for his name, and so he gives his surname as Himmler, and basically he's posing as Himmler's cousin. And he's like, yeah, I'll be taking your name, thank you, son, because my cousin's going to be interested to know who you are. And the guy just immediately backs off. Like, no, I'm fine.
It's really ballsy. It makes me think a little bit of, are there a lot of the Dirty Dozen movies mix into one in my mind. But aren't there bits in some of those films where it's a really similar thing where they have to sort of dress up as Nazis and get into some sort of hotel or some sort of and I feel like where Eagles Dare is just the good version of that.
The sort of premise of the Dirty Dozen is that, again, they've got to get to a German chateau where there's going to be a big gathering of senior German officers, and they're sent in to assassinate them all. And so I think they drive them into like an underground bunker, lock them in, and then just drop like a whole bunch of grenades in there and blow the shit out of them. So yeah, I think that was the premise there, and I think Telly Savalas almost blows the entire gig for them because he just goes on a murder spree. He's like the bad guy of the movie.
Telly Savalas has got a great haircut, in my opinion.
He does, yeah. It's like I can see it influenced you.
Yeah. I think of that song by the Misfits, Where Eagles Dare, whenever anyone mentions it. You know that song by the Misfits, I go where eagles dare. I don't know why, but that's the first thing that springs into my mind rather than the film. But I should rewatch it actually, because I do recall that Burton's performance was excellent, and of course Clint is nearly always great, isn't he?
Yeah, Clint was just great fun in that movie. I think he specifically said he wanted to have as little dialogue as possible, because originally he was going to be the mainstay of the movie, and he was like, no, I think Richard Burton is going to be the one that people care about, and people kind of know me as being like the man with no name, the gunslinger from westerns and stuff, and so I want to play up to that. And so his character doesn't have a huge amount of dialogue in it, but he's just this awesome kind of presence. Like, he's obviously a big dude, and he gets to do a lot of the action scenes. There, like I say, there's a great scene where he basically holds off an entire like platoon of German soldiers single-handed. Just got the two submachine guns there. It's pretty cool. Like,
yeah, because it's one of the things actually where my picks are quite often older films. A few of them, 3 of them, 4 of them are from the 70s. So it's interesting to look back what the sort of really, really famous actors in it had done before, sort of where they were in their careers, you know. Or not just the actors, but also sort of the directors, where they are in their career, sort of if they're already massively famous or not. And it's interesting to have a look at that and see that actually this person that we know now as sort of a god of the silver screen was actually quite new in 1976 or whatever.
It's
Clint would have been relatively new, I suppose, relatively anyway.
It's really interesting. Like there's movies like The Longest Day. It's got a small role for Sean Connery, but he was just basically like a cameo. But that was obviously before he'd become famous as James Bond, and so it's really weird just seeing him in playing little roles like this. Even then, he's good fun though. You know, he's playing an Irishman for some reason. He can't do a fucking Irish accent to save his life, but does try. Bless him.
Well, I've got a Connery film, so no, he's great, of course, always.
Yeah. So yeah, what was your first pick?
Well, I'm not sure which ones, like I say, because they're all just 5 amazing films, so I'm not sure which one to do first, but I think maybe, well, let's get it out of the way. Apocalypse Now.
Okay.
The reason why I say let's get it out of the way is because it's, of my 5, it's the one that's sort of really obvious, a little bit of a cliche, really. Lots of people think it's amazing. Lots of people say it's one of the best war films and almost certainly the best Vietnam film. There are some other good ones, of course, like Full Metal Jacket. But Apocalypse Now, I know that I rewatched your relatively short video about that actually the other day, just to make sure your feelings on it.
Oh yeah, the Production Hell video, yeah.
Yeah, it was a Production Hell one. So actually, I want to pick your brain a little bit about it, because there were some details in there which I didn't know, even though I've watched the documentary, you know, the making of the Heart of Darkness, or whatever it's called, and a few other documentaries around it. So I know a fair bit, but there were still a couple of details in there which I hadn't heard before. And so, yeah, I'm picking Apocalypse Now. That's my one Vietnam pick. And I like it because it's sort of surreal and a bit weird. And I feel like that's kind of real. When you read enough accounts of people that are actually in wars, in combat, not just Vietnam, but in sort of World War I and World War II, quite often they describe things like that are in Apocalypse Now, where it's just surreal. You don't really know why a thing is happening, and it's absurd anyway, and yet it just keeps going on. And you see, you know, I feel like that's stressed quite a lot in Apocalypse Now. You know the scene where there's some bridge that they keep having to rebuild every night, and the Viet Cong blow it up every night, and they have to rebuild it, and there's just like fireworks going off. It's just a weird, surreal situation.
There's a lot of that in Apocalypse Now, and I think the further they go upriver, I think the more the movie emphasizes that. It's kind of like this. It's like all the sort of stereotypes of Vietnam dialed up to 11, like this weird psychedelic acid trip where everyone's like losing their minds, and you know, all sort of discipline and command and control is broken down amongst the troops. You know, they're like you say, that scene where they get to the last outpost and it's just this bridge that keeps getting blown up. And I guess it's like a metaphor for how futile Vietnam was, just the sheer destruction of it. There's a trooper there who's like hammering away at like a VC who's wounded out somewhere in no man's land. He's just expending hundreds of rounds on his machine gun trying to get this guy, and they end up using like one dude with a grenade launcher to take him out. And you know, and that guy just seems completely stoned and out of it. You know, it's a weird movie, and the best way I can describe it, it's kind of an exhausting film. You know, by the time you get to the end of it, it's just so. It's like you've lost all sort of perspective by the time you get to the end. You know, it starts out, it's all the gung-ho kind of the ride of the Valkyries and that incredible action scene, you know, Charlie don't surf, and Robert Duvall is his, you know, the big gung-ho, you know, general. And that's the very kind of patriotic view of, you know, the war. The Americans just going and kicking ass with their choppers and blowing shit up. And that's great. The more they go upriver, the more things start to break down, and like some of their guys get killed off. The remaining ones lose their mind, and then they encounter Marlon Brando, and it's just him like sitting in a dark room just talking gibberish for fucking hours. And then it's Willard, you know, the main character, like it just comes down to this murder. Ultimately, just fucking hacks him to death with a machete, and it's intercut with like the bull getting slaughtered by the villagers, which is real. Actually, that was a real ceremony that was happening. It's a real animal getting killed on screen there. And yeah, it's just like I say. By the time you get to the end of the film, you just feel burned out, and I guess that's what they were going for. That's what the character feels like by the end. It's a hell of a movie.
I watched that film with a girlfriend once, and after it had finished, she was sort of profoundly disgusted because I told her that when they killed that cow, they slaughter a cow, don't they? And it's real. They really are hacking a live cow to bits. And she couldn't really get over that and was sort of disgusted, profoundly disgusted by that.
I mean, it was going to get done anyway because, like, I think
that's what I said.
It was like the villagers were going to do this thing, and they were like, "Well, can we film it?" Yeah, okay, sure. And so they put it in the movie, but then they couldn't have that thing that you get, like no animals were harmed in the making of this film. This one absolutely was harmed.
Yeah. Well, there's that bit. Just quickly go back to that bit where you mentioned, because I think it's a great bit, where at that bridge, where there's one guy, that really stoned guy, comes out with that grenade launcher, that thump gun, and shoots one grenade out into the darkness, and all the firing stops. There's that bit where Martin Sheen says to one of the guys in the trench, like, "Who's in charge?" And he spins round and says, "What? It's not you?" Because Willard's like an officer, isn't he? He's a captain or a major or something. And I think that is a greater bit than it first seems. Because, again, when you read lots of accounts of real combat soldiers, is quite often what it ends up like is a small band of men, a very small group of men, maybe 5, 6, 7 guys, fighting for their life, not really knowing what's going on. Yeah. That's what it nearly always boils down to. And I just find it interesting that scene sort of does sort of encapsulate it quite well, that on the front line, after things have sort of petered out and you're like many days or weeks into some sort of offensive, you end up with like this small band of men that don't really know what's going on or what they should really be doing, and there isn't really anyone in charge. That seems to play out again and again and again and again in wars, and you just got a small flavour of that in that bit of Apocalypse Now, and I just think that's a great bit, perhaps better than what it first seems.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many bits like that in Apocalypse Now, and I think, you know, the sense that you really get with that film is just an army that's breaking down. You know, they've got all the weapons and all the equipment they could ever ask for, but like they are just stuck in a hellhole that like they are losing sight of what they're fighting for. Most of them have just like they want to get the fuck out of there. And you know, you get scenes like that where discipline and command is just broken down completely, and it's just guys fighting for their lives. And I think, again, that's what you see more and more of as the film progresses. You get further and further away from the coastline and deeper into Vietnam. I love the bit where they're just moving up river, and like there's the tail fin of a B-52 bomber just sticking up out the swamp. You know, it's just like they don't say anything; they just cruise on by it. But again, it's just wreckage of war everywhere. You know.
Yeah, and like the 4-star clowns back at the Pentagon don't really know what's going on. and
Marlon Brando, again, great performance from him. Completely not what they wanted from him, but he just did his own thing in this movie. He was famously a nightmare to work with on this film. He showed up like totally overweight and hadn't learned his lines. He hadn't read the book Heart of Darkness like they'd asked him to. And I don't know. Basically, he was just being an asshole and being Marlon Brando. And then I think it was I can't remember what they did, but they basically like locked him on a boat or something for like a good few days. And I think he had a copy of the book with him. And eventually he came out, he'd shaved his head, and he's like, right, I'm ready to be Colonel Kurtz now. And then they pretty much just filmed him, you know, talking absolute nonsense for hours on end. Just whatever he wanted to say, they just filmed it. And you got the highlights in the movie. That's what he's, you know, he's sitting there talking about how they can drop fire on the enemy, but they're not allowed to write the word fuck on their planes because it's obscene. Just stuff like that. That's all just made up by him. And I think by the time he got to the end of that, like he just said to the director, he's like, Francis, I've gone as far as I can go with this. If you need more, then you're going to have to get a different actor because I'm done. And then he just fucked off, and that was him done.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, so people,
Insane.
so Francis Ford Coppola and Brando had already worked together on The Godfather.
Yeah.
Which had been massively successful, won lots of Oscars and things. And Brando was, sort of Hollywood royalty, wasn't he, by that point?
He was, yeah, but he was, I think by this point in his career, was having a lot of personal issues and just becoming increasingly difficult to work with. And they famously fell out over this movie. And I don't think they ever really spoke again with each other, because it was such a difficult experience getting it made.
What about Dr. Zhivago? I think that was after. I think True Romance, and they keep saying it's a great fucking movie, Dr. Zhivago.
I would need to check, actually, but as far as I was aware, they really fell out after Apocalypse Now, and that was essentially them done with each other. But I could be wrong.
So there's that thing where, sort of famously, it was, as you say, like a production hell, and it's based on the book by Joseph Conrad, Heart of Darkness, where it's not set in Vietnam. Of course, Conrad was writing in the early 20th century. It's set in Africa, isn't it? I haven't actually read Conrad's Heart of Darkness, I must admit.
Kurt's in the book is meant to be like really thin, like he's ill and he's emaciated and stuff, and that's kind of what they wanted Brando to do. And then he showed up, obviously, like really overweight, and they're like, "Oh Christ, what are we going to do with this guy?" So they had to shoot all of his scenes basically in the dark, so you couldn't tell how big he was, and that was their way of trying to hide it. But man, it was touch and go.
Yeah, and he wouldn't really read his lines that Coppola had written for him, would he? He just
wouldn't read anything.
To read them. I mean, what a nightmare. And when you look back on it, because I didn't know that until many years after I'd first seen it. Again, I saw this when I was quite young, had it taped off the telly on VHS. And so I'd watched it loads of times before I watched a documentary about the making of it. And I didn't really realise, why would you, I suppose, that his lines are sort of gibberish, sort of nonsense, aren't they? But not entirely. I mean, I think it's still a great performance. I think that when they edited it together, that was sort of a great piece of work to sort of salvage anything from it. Because famously wasn't Harvey Keitel cast, and they even started shooting with Harvey Keitel was Martin Sheen's part, but then he fell out with Coppola, I believe.
Yeah.
And also, who's Kurtz's American lackey with all the cameras?
Oh, that's Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, didn't Dennis Hopper and Brando completely fall out? Like they couldn't almost be on the same set at the same time because Hopper just wouldn't stand for any of his shit.
I know Val Kilmer and Brando fell out on Island of Dr. Moreau. Like they famously fucking hated each other. I'm not sure about Dennis Hopper. I know he was he was struggling with many issues at the time, and there was a bit where he had to do a scene where he's ranting at Martin Sheen, and he was really struggling to get in the frame of mind for it. And Coppola took him aside and he's like, "Look, what do you need, man, to get ready for this?" And he just replied saying, "About half an ounce of cocaine ought to do the trick." So they got him his cocaine, and he was just raring to go after that.
They obliged him.
Hopper was high as a kite when he was doing these scenes. That's why he's so manic when he's just ranting away about calculations and how you put men on the moon and just nonsense like that. Again, just whatever popped into his head, he would just say it. It's brilliant. Like this entire movie was just based on drugs, I think.
You can sort of see it a bit when he's like, he can't find the words. He's like, he's a man's man. You know, you can tell he's
and you can see how thin he is as well. Like he was having a tough time. This was actually a real like low point in Hopper's career as well. He was really struggling to get work, and his performance in this kind of rejuvenated his career. So it it was good for him. It wasn't so good for Martin Sheen. He had a heart attack in the middle of
Yeah.
filming. He was
And
only
didn't
like in
he
his
keep
30s, but he
Didn't he
collapsed
keep
in
it
the
quiet
jungle.
from everyone as well? So,
Was it? Yeah, he did. Yeah. Because they knew, like, if news got out that he'd had a heart attack, the producers would shut down the film, and so it was just dealt with very quietly. But he collapsed in the jungle. He had to like stagger out onto a road, having had a heart attack, and he was rushed off to hospital. But like they just passed it off as like indigestion or something. I don't fucking know.
it was the 70s. You could just get away with stuff more.
Yeah, absolutely. So
And
yeah,
wasn't there lots of not just cocaine but LSD? I seem to remember, because I haven't seen the documentary for many years, but I seem to remember them saying that loads of the cast and Coppola himself were taking lots of LSD. So that's not just like being drunk or being high on cocaine or something, but it's like actually like mind warping sort of drugs. And so no wonder you're left with, well, the final thing is sort of, it kind of is surreal in places, isn't it?
it's absolutely surreal. Yeah, that film is all over the place. And again, I think it's to its credit, really, because whether they'd intended that or not, like it just takes you into the frame of mind of the characters as they're slowly losing their minds towards the end of the film. Like I say, it just becomes this crazy acid trip where, you've got like rock and roll music playing and he's hacking Kurtz to pieces and you get the bull getting slaughtered, and it's just, it's all over the place. But it's all about man's descent into madness, I suppose, in the middle of war. And I think if that's what they were going for, they captured it pretty well, whether they'd intended it or not,
Yeah, there's a couple of bits in it. When you hear near the beginning, the sort of the generals, the brass, play Martin Sheen a recording they've got of Kurtz, and he's talking about that his dream is a snail slithering across the edge of a straight razor and surviving, and it's just madness. I remember thinking when I was a kid or a teenager when I first watched it that was somehow, even though I've got no frame of reference, that seems like a genuine depiction of madness to me. I feel like that writing or that bit is really good. And I remember that there's another bit right near the beginning of the film where you see Martin Sheen sort of losing it on his own in a room, and he punches the mirror, and you see him crying and breaking down.
That was real. That wasn't acting. He was an alcoholic at the time.
And at the end of his tether as well, for real, sort of thing, wasn't he?
Yeah, and they just set up a camera and filmed him, and he just sat there drinking, and just kind of lost his mind. And he said to them, "Yeah, just keep shooting." And so when he punches a mirror, he's got his hands bleeding and stuff. That's all real. He's lying on the floor crying his eyes out. That's completely real. That's a man genuinely losing his fucking mind right in front of your eyes. It's interesting to watch.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I mean, I remember seeing that when I was a bit too young, really. I was, I don't know, 14 or 15, and not really understanding that. It's a very adult thing, isn't it? Very, very, very adult thing for sort of a grown man, a strong grown man, to sort of see him break down and lose it like that. And I remember thinking, what's wrong with him? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
Not really taken on board that he's supposed to be some sort of, a professional killer, an assassin, isn't he? He's supposed to be,
he is.
Sort of the hardest, sort of the darkest of the dark wet team sort of thing, and no wonder his psyche is supposed to have been scarred. And I just remember, as I say, when I'm like 15 or something, thinking, I don't really understand. Why is he crying? I don't. What's wrong?
It's like, it's one of those things where you see the aftermath of the movie, and then it kind of cuts back to explain how he ended up like that, and so. Yeah, that's the kind of movie. It's almost in reverse, So like Apocalypse Now, a solid pick for sure.
Oh, can I ask one more thing about it? This is the thing I wanted to pick your brain about. In your little video, your sort of 10-minute odd video, you say that there was something about how, because it was all filmed in the Philippines largely, I believe, and you said something about how real cool, because there was a real civil war going on in the Philippines at the time. And some of the helicopters are actually being used on real live exercises in between takes.
Yeah, they kept getting called away. Basically, that's why they got delayed so much.
But you mentioned that there was sort of real bodies at one point, like real cadavers or real dead bodies or something, and that in the background when they're supposed to be deep in Cambodia, and there's sort of some real bodies, and that the production might have been in modern times bloody prosecuted for doing something wrong. What's that? I've never heard that. What's that all about?
I think they went to a local morgue, and a guy was able to hook them up. Yeah, they're real. I didn't believe it until I read it. Yeah.
That is mad, isn't it? That is kind of mad.
That is next level. Like, I would not want to be on that fucking film shoot.
Yeah,
I think when you see that, when you get to the stage of like, yeah, we're shooting this scene and there's actual real dead human bodies that we're using, I'd be like, nah, it's time to call it quits, I think.
Yeah, it's getting a bit too real. So do you want to move on to your second pick?
All right. So my second pick is The Big Red One.
I've not seen that.
Wow, interesting. Well, so it's a war movie that's set during World War II. It stars Mark Hamill and Lee Marvin, and it's about a squad of U.S. infantrymen from the 1st Infantry Division. That's why it's called the Big Red One. They got like the number 1 on their uniforms. And it's their experiences basically going all through the war. So it starts off with landing in North Africa and fighting there, Sicily, landing on Normandy during the D-Day invasions, moving through Northern Europe, and they even liberate a concentration camp at one point, and then it kind of culminates. I guess the way to explain it is like, Lee Marvin is like the Sarge, he's this grizzled veteran, and he fought in the First World War. So the movie opens at the very end of World War One, where the armistice has been signed, but he doesn't know, and so he's out in no man's land. He's been caught there or something during attack, and a German soldier is trying to surrender, and because he doesn't believe that the war has ended, he attacks him from behind and kills him with a bayonet. Then when he makes his way back to his own trench, he's told that the war has ended. He's like, well, it is for him anyway. He's quite cold about it. Then you go forward 20 years and it's him again, obviously a lot older now, and he's getting ready to land in North Africa with his infantry squad, and it's kind of narrated by one of the members of the squad. And I think it's kind of loosely based on the director's own experiences during World War II. He was a veteran. I think this is probably the last movie that was made by a guy who was actually in the Second World War. I think it was 1980 it was made. So he was getting quite old by that point. But yeah. It describes their various experiences. They fight in different theaters. They have to take out snipers, for example. When they do the D-Day invasions, it's like the whole kind of scene there is them trying to get off the beach because like they're pinned down, obviously, like so many of the troops were. And the only way to do it is one of those Bangalore torpedo things where you have to like get them into the barbed wire and blow them up. And it's like the Sarge has to keep sending guys forward to pick up this big explosive thing and shove it into the barbed wire. And every time they do, they get cut down by machine gun fire. So they get it a little further forward, and he has to just keep picking people to do it. It's like putting them into a firing squad. But they eventually, make it ashore there. There's a kind of subplot where Mark Hamill's character is, he's afraid to kill people. He's afraid to fire his weapon. And so there's a couple of times throughout the movie where he's got a shot at someone, but he doesn't take it. And his buddies are starting to get increasingly suspicious of him. Like they're worried that he's not going to have their backs. And I think the bit where he finally does manage to kill someone is where they liberate a concentration camp. And they're making their way through this place, and he gets to like one of the sections where the big ovens are, and there's like a German hiding in one of them, who tries to shoot him, like basically hiding amongst all these charred bones and stuff. But the German's gun jams, and that's when he finally is able to kill someone. And yeah, it kind of culminates in 1945 where the armistice has been signed once again. Lee Marvin he's befriended one of the children that they liberated from the camp, but he's so kind of weak that he ends up passing away. And so he's distraught by this, and he's sitting there on his own that evening. And again, a German soldier approaches him and tries to surrender. And just like at the start of the movie, he ambushes him and knifes him. But he's not quite dead, and that's when the rest of his squad catch up to him and tell him, the war's over. And unlike at the start of the movie, he realizes like this guy was just trying to surrender, and so they kind of patch him up and like they take him away. But you get a really interesting narration at the end of it from one of the squad, basically saying that German guy that we saved there, we had more in common with him than all the replacements that came and went throughout our squad all this time. Because basically the point of the movie is like so many guys get brought in to replace casualties, and they lose so many people over the course of the war that they kind of avoid even getting to know these guys because they come and go so quickly. And the narration basically ends with saying like we had more in common with that German guy than all those replacements that we'd never known because we were all survivors. And that was really all the glory you can expect out of war, is to just stay alive. Like, because ultimately we were all just human beings trying to make it through. Excuse me. And I know that's kind of a long-winded explanation of the film, but it's a hell of a good movie.
Yeah, it sounds great. Just thinking about it, I just quickly looked it up there on Google, and it said 1980. So that's interesting. It's like, so Hamill had done A New Hope, but the other two films weren't out yet, right? So maybe this is probably one of his first, other famous films after A New Hope. I take it.
No, it's and he's really good in it. Excuse me, probably a bit of the Rona kicking in. No, like I say, his character is he's afraid to kill, and so it becomes a real point for him throughout the movie. He's very conflicted about it. But yeah, Hamill gives a great performance, and so do all the actors in it, especially Lee Marvin.
It does sound really good. It sounds right up my alley. I'll find it and give it a watch, because I'm thinking, obviously I haven't seen it, so I can't comment too much on it. But in the film Patton, where you sort of see the Americans in North Africa first, there's a big battle at the Kasserine Pass, I think it was called, and then parachuting into Sicily. Brad Pitt in the old Inglourious Basterds talks about jumping out of a fucking aeroplane just to teach the German a lesson in humanity. But it does sound like a really good film, and they end up in Germany, I take it, then at the end of the war.
Yeah.
They fought their way up. If that had been a single film rather than a HBO TV series, I would have picked the Band of Brothers, but I thought we're not doing TV, just movies.
Yeah. See, that's the reason I am. Sorry, I need to get a drink of water. Oh man. Apologies to the people watching this. I can't get my words out.
That's okay. I can see your eyes are watering. Sometimes it feels like a speck of dust has sort of been fired at the back of your throat, and there's just no amount of throat clearing can sort it out.
That's it. When I was describing the movie there, I was like, I need to get through the description, and like my throat was getting more and more itchy. Oh man, that's
if
annoying.
You need to take a minute and honestly go get a drink of water or something, it's not a problem.
No, it's fine. It's it'll clear itself. I apologize to people watching this that you're just getting like half an hour of me coughing. It's like there we go. All that toilet duck is finally coming back to haunt him. Indeed. Yeah. That was part of the reason that I didn't include Das Boot in my list, because it's more of a TV show. It's a miniseries. I know they did produce a movie version, but they really cut it down a lot, and you miss so much that you get in the miniseries. That's why I didn't put that on my list, but otherwise it probably would have been there, because I think that's fantastic. Das Boot.
Yeah, I've only seen the sort of feature-length movie version. I've not seen the full unabridged. And nonetheless, I think it's great. Like I say, I only just didn't make the cut. Obviously, in a sense, it's very slow. It's a very, very slow film in many ways. But I think it's great. I mean, most people that have seen it, if you sort of get on board with the pacing of it, it's really, really great. I agree with that.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my number 4 pick. So what have you got for us?
Okay, I'm going to go with. Again, I'm picking off the more cliche ones. I'm going with The Great Escape.
Hey, yeah.
I bloody love The Great Escape.
Yeah. It's you can't help but enjoy it, can you?
Well, it's one of those films where, again, I had it sort of on VHS as a kid, so I've watched it, I don't know, 15, 20 times or something stupid. But not in quite a few years, actually. And I think it's great for all sorts of reasons. One of the main reasons is that it just jumps sort of straight in, and there's no sort of wasted downtime, and they don't sort of waste. There's no sort of wasted time really with the story. It just sort of moves on. It gives the audience a fair bit of credit. It doesn't explain absolutely every tiny little detail exactly who is who, and that it's a true story in many ways. I mean, there is a large element of it which is fictionalized, and most of the characters are actually an amalgam of people.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the general sweep of the story is true, and some bits of it are really quite exactly accurate to real life. And so, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love it. And there's a lot of the characters in it are kind of, well, they're charismatic, aren't they? And they're just it's hard not to go along with them.
I mean, you got Steve McQueen there. Just absolutely killing it, and I think the whole bike scene, where he leaps over the fence was just absolutely iconic. What's a shame, actually, he tried to do that himself because ultimately it was a stuntman that they used, but he tried to do that scene himself because obviously he was a race driver and he was pretty competent on the bike, but I think he didn't quite hit the jump, and so kind of missed it, and they were like, oh, we can't have you keep doing this because you're going to get yourself killed, and you're like the main star, so they had to use a stuntman in the end, and it's a shame, but yeah, it's just an awesome scene. And I think Great Escape's been one of those ones that's become just a British tradition. Like if it's a bank holiday or if it's Christmas or Boxing Day or something, chances are the Great Escape will be on. And it's just a good fun movie.
When I was a kid, I feel like every Sunday either The Great Escape or Zulu was on.
Yeah.
Obviously not. It just felt like that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And what else is it? I love that bit where some of the guys are trying to bluff their way onto a train. They're getting their papers searched by a German, and it seems to be going okay. And then the German just says to him, "Good luck." And without thinking, the guy just goes, "Thank you." And then you just see that moment of, "Oh, fuck, no, I messed up."
Yeah, that is one of the greatest bits of that movie. It's so good.
But they do such a great job of establishing all the different characters. And then when they stage the escape, and they all kind of split up and go their different ways, they're all using different methods to try and escape. And so you're so invested in them by that point, you desperately want them all to succeed, and then one by one you see them get captured, and it's great at making you just root for everybody. I think.
Yeah, and well, I like, one of the reasons I like it is that it's so, most of it anyway is really very English or British, isn't it? I mean, so being a captive of the Nazis deep inside Germany, because the actual camp, Stalag Luft 3, is sort of just south of Berlin. So you're deep inside Germany, and so the idea that the officers anyway don't just give up, that they see that their duty once captured is actually to cause the Germans as much hassle as possible.
Yeah.
But to do it in, I think, really quite a British way, because there are a lot of Americans in it as well. But I just think, showing sort of that stiff upper lip in the face of death, really, because even though sort of the tone of the film is sort of fairly jovial a lot of the time, they are dicing with death. A lot of them were murdered at the end of it all, sort of direct orders directly from Hitler that most of the returned POWs will be killed.
Yeah, well, you get that scene where they're taken out into a field. A bunch of them, they're taken off this truck. They're not told what's happening,
until the tarpaulin comes down off the back and there's the machine gun, and that's them all just executed. And it's got that really sobering element to it. As much as the film is kind of lighthearted, it's kind of portrayed as a bit of an adventure, and there's action-packed bits, and there's a certain bit of tongue-in-cheek humor as well. Like Steve McQueen with his ball that he's bouncing off the wall and stuff. That bits like that just remind you like there was a real cost to all of this.
Yeah, because sort of the true story, if I sort of do a little bit of the in my wheelhouse, the real history of it. It's an incredible plan that they wanted to break out 200 guys or 250 odd guys was the plan originally. This is all in real life. And the guy, Roger Bushell, which is the character played by Richard Attenborough, Lord Attenborough. In the film, they call him Bartlett, but it was based on a real guy, Roger Bushell. And in real life, they ended up getting 76 guys out of one of the tunnels.
Yeah.
Two of the tunnels were discovered, and it was only the third one that they still were able to keep open. And it was only the 77th guy that it was when the Germans realised what was going on. And out of all of those, so 76 guys escaped. 73 of them were recaptured. 3 did, in fact, get away. A Dutchman and 2 Norwegians actually got back to Allied lines one way or another. But of the 73 that were recaptured, 50 were executed by the Germans. And there's still a memorial there to this day for those 50. It's but no Americans. None of those 76 guys were Americans. So the Steve McQueen bit is pure Hollywood. There you go.
But I think that's part of it's kind of a symptom of the movie being a mostly American production, I think, and it's kind of one of those little ironies that it's seen as this British tradition of watching The Great Escape at Christmas and stuff. It's seen as a British movie, but it kind of wasn't. It was a Hollywood movie, and it's got a largely American cast, apart from Attenborough and a couple other guys. But we've just embraced it, and like you say, I think it's really got that British stiff upper lip style just perfect, and I think that's why it's appealed so much. But it's just a great fun movie, and it's such a satisfying film to watch. Like it's a classic pick, and it's funny because I didn't have it on my list because I kind of thought you might have had it. So I'm glad you did. It was kind of the same with Apocalypse Now. I figured I don't want to just pick the same ones as each other, so I'm glad that you picked that one too.
I was worried. I thought the exact same thing about Apocalypse Now. I thought if there was going to be any crossover, that might be the one. But one of the things I wanted to mention just real quick about The Great Escape is it came out in sort of 1963, which is, it's less than 20 years after the real World War II. And so, a lot of it is authentic. They rebuilt the camp for the movie, but it was in southern Germany. It was near Munich. Like the real guys, so a lot of the real survivors, were sort of, what would you call it, advisors on the movie, and they told them exactly what the real camp, Stalag 3, was like. Exactly, how the huts were created and how they're all laid out and how tall the fences were and everything. And so I think with The Great Escape, even though it is, a Hollywood fiction in a lot of ways, lots of it, people that were actually there say, oh no, it looks perfect. It looks exactly like the real thing.
I think that's the advantage they had back then, is having ready access to the guys that had been through it. Obviously, you can't do that now. We just don't have them. But back then, it was a lot more feasible. It's pretty cool stuff. I was going to say as well, actually, because we've done a few of these movies now, but there is quite a few super chats here. So I wonder if we could maybe do a few of them just so they don't pile up too much by the end.
Yeah, of course. I've noticed you're having a beer. You don't mind if I have a drink also?
Crack on, mate. It's practically obligatory at this point.
Well, I bought some JD.
Hey, man after my own heart. There you go.
I don't even like JD. I'm on a stream with The Drinker, so it seemed like the done thing. So,
yeah, see, I'm on Moretti tonight. I'm taking it easy,
I'll have
yeah,
a wee dram whilst I'm on stream with.
yeah. Are you just gonna have it neat? Damn.
Yeah.
All right, I like it. All right, I'm gonna bring up some super chats here. Sorry, I can't make them appear on screen because they will have moved beyond that, but I'll just read them out. So, Maca Jr. says, "Drinker, you raunchy, rambunctious rapscallion of retorts. Look forward to watching the stream on the replay. Have you played the Legacy of Kain games? God damn, those are classics from the PS1 era. Yeah, like, what is it? Blood Omen or something. Legacy of Kain." Yeah, I never played the first one, but I played the second one where you're like Kane's protege or something, and you get like betrayed by him and sent down to hell, and you got to fight your way out. I quite like that. I think that might be in the PlayStation 2, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, like they're late 90s, early 2000s. They were pretty decent games back in the day, as I recall.
I never played those. I did own a PS1, and the only game I seem to remember playing loads on that was Red Alert. Played tons of Red Alert on the PS1 for some reason.
Red Alert was a classic, man. Honestly, it was great fun. Because I remember you could get a link cable. Yeah, that's not going down too well, is it? It's an acquired taste. Yeah, you could take your PlayStation around to a mate's house, right, and get a cable that would join them together, so you could play against each other on Red Alert. That's what you had to do in the days before like high-speed internet. You had to like physically link the PlayStations together and bring a TV as well. Fucking hell. It was a big investment.
TVs and two PS1s in the same living room. Yeah.
Right, what's the next one here? RRTNZ says, "Hail Drinker, Slush Sultan of Storytelling. Love the Halloween content and would also love to hear you discuss V for Vendetta for Guy Fawkes sometime. Different from Moore's vision, but still compelling. Cheers." Well, that's a good point, actually, because we're almost on November the 5th, so I think that'd be a great time to do V for Vendetta. I really like that movie.
Yeah, that's a bloody great movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that again in years, and I feel like it's sort of passed into popular consciousness in not necessarily a brilliant way, but the original movie is great. I seem to remember I've seen it 3 or 4 times.
It's really funny because people take V's speech from V for Vendetta, and whatever side of the political spectrum you're on or whatever argument you're trying to back up, they seem to just use that speech as like, a way of justifying what they think. And it's really weird because like if you see the politics of the original novel, it's way different from what they probably think. But yeah, the movie itself is great. I think the dialogue's great, the direction's great. Great movie, and I love Hugo Weaving as V. He's just brilliant. It shows like what a great actor can do without actually even having his face on screen. It's just a mask.
Yeah. Stephen Fry's good in it. Don't you see Natalie Portman dressed up as a little girl at some point? I seem to that image was in my mind.
There's a bit where I think they have to get a priest or something.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, the young priest. That's it. Yeah.
And so she's there in like a ballerina outfit for some reason. Like Natalie Portman was young when this film was made, but she wasn't that young. It was really weird.
Yeah, she was an adult.
Yeah, totally. RRTNZ also says, "I took your recommendations on Courage Under Fire and Hunt for Red October. Thanks, totally worth it." Great films. I love Hunt for Red October. In return, I recommend Crimson Tide. Yep, excellent. 1995 nuclear submarine thriller with Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman. Cheers. Yeah, Crimson Tide's fantastic. I referenced it once, actually, when I was doing a video about the Last Jedi and Admiral fucking Purple Hair. The kind of conflict between her and Poe and how that compares, because it's a similar situation to what you had in Crimson Tide, but that movie was smart enough to actually give you two characters with opposing viewpoints that were both equally justified. And so you understood where both men were coming from in that film, whether to launch the missiles or not, because they've both got a justification for what they're doing. Whereas in Last Jedi, it was just dumb as fuck and it was contrived, and it shows the difference in screenwriting ability there. That's a great example, and it's a good example of command in really difficult situations.
Yeah, it's funny how sort of in our modern era, how the writing seems to be just so poor. I'm not going out on a limb here. It's obvious. Everyone says it. But just how is the screenplay so poor? With a lot of these films, I've sort of looked into the screenwriters or the writers, and quite often they're sort of guys that are really established as playwrights or as novelists and things. They're great writers. And it's just weird that you end up with, well, take for example the sort of modern tranche of Star Wars, how the writers seem to be childishly inept or something. I don't know what's going on there. It's so weird.
I think childish is the perfect description. And I'm going to be making a video about this fairly soon, because I did one about why modern movies don't work, and how setup and payoff isn't used anymore. But the next one I'm going to do is basically that modern movies are written by children for children. And that's why you have such terrible writing now, because it's people with the minds of children trying to write adult characters, and they just can't do it, because they don't have, most of the time, they don't have any real experience of working with real adults, because they've been sheltered their whole lives. And so what you get is characters that are just all about emotion, and they're volatile. Nobody is stoic anymore. Nobody is cool under pressure. Everybody just loses their shit at the slightest thing. Everyone has to talk about their feelings all the time. It's not how real people operate in the slightest, and that is the key difference. And I think, that's going to be my basis of that video. But you're exactly right when you say there's a childish kind of ineptitude to writing nowadays, and it's precisely because of that. We have people with the minds of children,
and the plots are often terribly contrived or just nonsensical. Quite often in your reviews, you'll say something like, "And why did this happen? Don't know. Just move on." Like, that should hardly ever happen, where the audience are just like, "Oh, don't know. It doesn't make any sense, but who cares?" That should hardly ever happen in a film where lots and lots of money is being spent on it, but they don't seem to care.
That is exactly it. And I think as long as they keep making money, they're not going to care, because why should they? Back in the days that, the 80s or the 90s, when we were talking about movies like Crimson Tide there, you kind of had to produce good quality stuff in order for it to sell. You couldn't just trot out another Marvel movie, which could be good or it could be absolute garbage, and it doesn't matter, because people will just go and see it by the thousands, the millions even. Back then, these movies were just standalone films. They had to stand on their own merits, and so they had to be good. And you just don't get it anymore.
It does make me think of that bit we just spoke about in Apocalypse Now, when you see Martin Sheen sort of breaking down in that hotel room, punching a mirror and crying his eyes out, with no real explanation. There's no voiceover saying this is what would they say, sort of a post-traumatic stress or whatever. It's not really explained. It just shows you it and leaves you to understand what's going on. That would not happen now, right? They wouldn't have the confidence, I would have thought, as storytellers, to do something like that. That's what I feel anyway. And what a disappointment! What an indictment of our modern world.
I mean, a movie like Apocalypse Now would never even get made nowadays. When you see what they went through to make that movie, and the kind of crazy shit that was going on set, none of that would be allowed nowadays. It just wouldn't be allowed to happen. It would be all safe and controlled. In fact, it would be in a nice, comfortable studio somewhere, and like the Vietnam jungle would just be a green screen behind them. So nobody would be even slightly inconvenienced while making this film. And you wouldn't get that rawness that you got with these older movies. Again, like movies like The Deer Hunter and stuff, you wouldn't be allowed to make a film like that nowadays. And this is what I end up coming to a lot when I do these live streams, when we talk about films that are a bit older, even relatively recent ones. Like Az and I talked about Tropic Thunder, and there's a lot of like humor that would never be allowed nowadays in it, but it's funny as fuck, and like we can all see it, but we just know it wouldn't be allowed nowadays because it would offend someone. And that's the world you live in now. You've got this weird sanitized, childish, infantilized sort of way of making movies, and it's just bland as anything.
That's not even that old, is it? Tropic Thunder. What is that? 10 years old?
I think it's about 2008. Yeah, so about 13 years.
Still not that long ago, and yeah, you're absolutely right. There's loads of things in that they just wouldn't happen now. I feel like on the set of Apocalypse Now, if like some blue-haired Karen would see someone doing a line of coke, and they'd be squealing them up on Twitter within 20 seconds.
Oh yeah,
getting it closed down.
You would see it. It'd be like toxic masculine behavior on set. Shocking revelations, and it's just nothing would be allowed. There would be none of this crazy, like, intense artistry that was going on in films like that. It would just be too much for these people. And it would trigger them because it invades their safe space, whatever the word is. I don't know. And yeah, like we don't live in that era of cinema anymore, and I don't think we will ever get it back. That's the sad thing.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. Unfortunately,
but anyway, let me see what the next one here. Stephen Lanuto says, "Hail Drinker, dropping my super chat early because I'm at work. Any chance you'd review Crimson Tide?" I've talked about Crimson Tide already. Also, have you seen Brotherhood of the Wolf? Love Great Escape McQueen on your pick. Here's to Big X. So I haven't seen Brotherhood of the Wolf. Obviously seen Crimson Tide, and we've talked about that, and I've kind of got a video that covers it already. And yeah, I think we both love Great Escape, so we've covered those too. Drive-by commenter says, "Hail Drinker, great choice of topic, especially since there's no vanity in these films like modern films. The dangerous experiences are the star of the show. Characters are simply defined through them." I would agree, very much so. Morlock's Abyss says, "Greatest war movie ever is clearly Braveheart. Fisticuffs for anyone who disagrees." It's a great. It's funny, I didn't even really think of Braveheart as a war movie as such. It's like a historical epic more than a war film. There's definitely war in it. There's fighting for sure.
Yeah, no, I really love Braveheart. I know a bit about the real reign of Longshanks, a fair bit, and William Wallace and his historical shakiness. And yet, I think Braveheart is a great film. Obviously, it's historically way off. But if you can sort of see past that, I think it's a great story. I think it's a great movie. I think it's done really well. I mean, it's a bit corny in places. Nonetheless, sure. I do really like it. I think it's a great film.
Yeah. It knows exactly how to pull at the heartstrings and all that, and yeah, like they definitely knew how to pull on the whole patriotism, and how they framed Wallace and stuff, like as a freedom fighter. So yeah, it's definitely effective as a Hollywood movie for sure. Unhinged here says, "The Drinker is back. I've got a box of Kleenex and extra lotion ready." Well, pucker up, son, because you're going to need both. Chuxenhausen says, "This will be legendary, just like the legendary happy hour of Cobra Kai Season 4 with Drinker, Az, and Gary when it comes out in December. Go Hawk." I'm looking forward to that, man. That's going to be great fun. I'm going to bring you on, Chuxenhausen. If you want to come on and talk about Cobra Kai when we do it, you'll need to come on because we know your passion for that. Willow Wookie says, "Mandem." That's all we need. Mandem. Krusty Jugglers says, "Hail Drinker, you eloquent yet rugged destroyer of the message. Full Metal Jacket should never be remade. They'd probably cast Melissa McCarthy as Hartman. Sorry to put that image in your head." Jesus. I can't unsee it.
No, I hope they don't remake that. There's no talk of that, is there?
I hope not. No, that's not a film you could remake now. No fucking way.
It's Kubrick, isn't it? And he's sort of a unique talent, wasn't he? Yeah. If they remade it, it's gonna be shit in comparison, isn't it? Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Kubrick was one of a kind when it came to filmmaking, and you'll never be able to equal that kind of intensity.
Do you know what we said just before we came on this, that there's a scene in American Werewolf in London which sort of traumatized me. I was far too young when I saw it. I was about 11 or 12 when the sort of weirdo monster Nazis break into the building and kill everyone. There's a bit in Full Metal Jacket when Private Pyle blows his own head off. It's really quite graphic, isn't it? I mean,
it's very graphic.
Shoot himself in the head.
Because it's not just blood that you see behind him; it's like chunks of brain and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I saw that I was a bit too young. I don't know how old I was. I don't know, 13 or something. And again, that sort of stuck with me a bit. So, but nonetheless, that is a bloody great movie. That also, doesn't it, highlights the sort of absurdity of it a lot.
Yeah, I think the point, I as far as I understand it, that Kubrick was trying to make there is like it's the dehumanization of the military, because the whole point is to break down all their individuality and just make them into machines that fight. And there's even a voiceover from, I think, Matthew Modine's character saying that, you know, the further they get through this training, the more that they were starting to break down as people and get remade as like these fighters, these killers that the drill instructors were struggling to control. And that's exactly how they wanted it. That's how they liked it. And that's pretty spot on. And you see, there's always going to be that guy who doesn't cut it. And that's why you get Private Pyle, who's just bullied because, you know, he's a bit incompetent and he's overweight, so he can't keep up on runs and all that. And yeah, he loses his shit, obviously, and kills himself. And he takes the drill instructor with him, who's legit like one of the best characters like that you could ever get, because it's R. Lee Army, isn't it? His name is a real drill sergeant from the Marine Corps. And yeah, he was an awesome character. I think he was just pretty much playing himself, wasn't he?
Yeah, I heard I don't know if this is right, but I heard somewhere that they got him on the set to sort of coach the actor who was going to play that part. And Kubrick was like, no, why don't you just do it? I want the authentic thing. And so Gunny is actually, you know, was a drill instructor. And so, yeah, you can't get any more authentic than that. It's great.
I think a lot of these, you know, a lot of these ex-military guys, they become like military advisors for war films like that. You know, that, like you say, they'll be on set to coach actors or just instruct them in like weapons drills and all that sort of thing. And you know, he's one of those lucky ones that Kubrick just spotted that in him. He's like, look, he's perfect. He looks the part. He can act the part. Let's just use him and put him on screen and just let him do his thing. And that's exactly what he did. He just nails every scene that he's in.
Yeah, he's like sort of genuinely intimidating, isn't he? Like, I was thinking the other day there's a film, one of the Kill Bill films, when Lucy Liu goes mad and she says, anyone else want to say anything? You know, do you remember that scene? I'll cut your head off if anyone says another word. Like, I remember thinking, that's not convincing at all. I'm not scared at all by that. But the drilling instructor in Full Metal Jacket, it's like, it's the real deal. It's sort of genuinely unnerving, sort of really intimidating for real sort of thing. It's great performance. Incredible.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love that. It's like, what the fuck is that? It's a jelly donut, sir. Yeah, because, you know, again, he's a great example of you don't always need size and strength to intimidate people, because he's not a big guy. You know, he's fairly short and he's quite lightly built, but he just absolutely radiates confidence and just energy like that. And you would never fuck with a guy like that, because you know he could break you in half if he wanted to. And it's just, perfect example of a guy who's been through it and lived through all that stuff, and it's toughened him and just made him into that kind of character that, you know, just an actor couldn't play, I don't think.
Yeah. No, I feel like basic training, especially infantry basic training, although I've never been in the forces, I should say really quickly, but sort of infantry basic training back in the day, it was sort of about breaking your will, I think, sort of making you not an individual anymore, but part of a fighting unit. And that means sort of breaking men's wills if need be. It's quite hard to think. Some people didn't survive basic training, you know, that's real.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of my mates have ended up serving in the military over here. Like, one was in the RAF, one was in the army, and they're saying like, there's some people that just don't cut it, and they're usually they don't kill themselves like in this. Like, they're usually just shipped out, and it's like, look, they're not fit for you know, for service, and they're just sent back to civilian life, I guess. But yeah, there's, like we were saying here, R. Lee Ermey started screaming at Kubrick drill instructor style as a demo. Kubrick instinctively responded as a recruit, and he was convinced. Just Perfect. Yeah. I'll do a couple more super chats and then we'll crack on with our movies.
Sure.
What's the next one? Charles Hurst says, I still don't understand why Hollywood hasn't made a movie about the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. You want to talk girl power? Those women had some of the biggest balls in Russia. Anyways, have one on me. Yeah, so I've heard about these. They were dive bombers, and apparently they would attack at night. And I think they'd fitted like these weird siren things to their planes that would create like a kind of screaming noise as they dive bombed. And it
like
scared the shit out of the Germans. What's that?
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, like a banshee. Weren't they called like the screaming banshees or something?
Yeah, the banshees, or they were witches or something like that. Like the Germans, fucking hated them. There we go, night witches. Yeah, they should absolutely make a movie about that, because it's like, there you've got some genuinely, interesting, real historical characters that were women who kicked ass in the war. I think the Soviets used women quite a bit in their armed forces. There's snipers and stuff that they had. Some of them got like well over 100 kills.
No, that's what I was going to say. It's funny how the Soviets and the National Socialists viewed women in combat very, very differently. Like Hitler was prepared to put old men and small boys really into the front line before women, whereas the Soviets were like, no, we don't mind. If anyone's up for doing it, then
I think the Soviets' concept of it was like, well, it's more meat shields for the motherland, so just throw them in there.
One of those women, I believe, got loads of kills. She wasn't just a female fighter pilot or ground attack pilot, but a very good one. If you believe the accounts, I think some people have said that maybe it might be, sort of Soviet propaganda, but nonetheless, there seems no doubt that they were there and they did do some pretty incredible things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you want to look for kind of examples of tough women, you're not going to get much more than like Soviets in World War II. Like they would fucking dismantle any dude from today. Like, I'll do one more and then we'll do some more movie chat. So Farewell Thunderchild says, no Hacksaw Ridge, We Were Soldiers, Jarhead, or Toy Soldiers. Sirs, I'm offended. Catch watch as earbuds dead, but look forward to the upload. Yeah, I mean, I've already done Hacksaw Ridge with Shad, which was a good chat. We Were Soldiers is a fantastic Vietnam film. That's definitely would have been in my my almost made it category. Wasn't a huge fan of Jarhead, to be fair. I get why it was like a well-regarded movie. I just didn't love it quite as much.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I didn't mind Jarhead. I give it sort of a 6 or 7. I didn't think it was terrible, but it wasn't. It wasn't great. I mean, like a lot of Iraq One films, like Three Kings or something. That's not good. Soldiers is great. What was the first one?
Let's see. So Hacksaw Ridge.
Oh, Hacksaw Ridge, right? Yeah, no, that's good as well. No, that's very, very good.
Yeah. I liked We Were Soldiers because the actual combat scenes are brilliant in it. Really well directed, really gruesome. There's some horrible bits in it, like when they accidentally drop napalm on their own troops, and they're trying to evacuate them. And I remember like one dude like encounters a friend of his, and he's got to try and get him to a medevac chopper. So it's like, right, grab his feet. We'll pick him up, and like because he's been so badly burned, the skin just kind of comes right off his legs as he's trying to like pick him up. It's like awful. It's gruesome stuff.
No, it's like the same with Saving Private Ryan. A lot of the violence is, ultra realistic. It seems anyway. I've never been in a battle, but it seems sort of almost ultra real.
So I'll if it's all right, I'll tell you my next one. So my next pick was Black Hawk Down.
Okay, cool.
So I'm going more modern this time around. It's I'm sure everyone knows it, but it's the story of like a US Special Forces group that was sent into Mogadishu to take out an enemy commander, and they ended up getting bogged down in basically a siege. So it was like 100 guys versus something like 2,000 enemy militia, and it's just an absolute pitched battle for about 2 days straight. Just incredible battle scenes. A great example of like the professionalism of these guys, like just facing incredible, overwhelming odds, but like standing their ground and just using superior training to hold their ground. And the fact that they don't leave a man behind. You know, there's various times throughout the movie where they have to go back for people, or they have to try and evacuate people from a helicopter crash site. Because obviously the title of the movie is Black Hawk Down, and like their transport choppers keep getting shot down, and that means they have to then rescue the crew that are downed in these things. Yeah, just an overall great film, like really solidly directed and a great cast.
Yeah, they leave Spud behind, don't they?
Yeah. I think that's by accident. Like they'd forgotten about him or something.
Yeah. No, that's a great pick, actually. Yeah, that's really good. Of course, the real story, again, it's quite. It seems it's quite faithful to what really happened. So yeah, that is a really good pick. I've seen it a few times. There is that. Do you find with Black Hawk Down that there's a bit of? I suppose it happens in all war films, but a little bit of the dehumanization of the other side. You know, they call them skinnies quite a lot, don't they? And
yeah, I mean, they're not
disposable, like soldiers, like foot soldiers from a Turtles movie. They're just there.
Yeah, there's not a lot of characters in the other side, is there?
Not that I'm bothered. It doesn't really bother me or anything, but
yeah, I mean, it's very much told from the US point of view. So, like you say, yeah, you don't really get to see it from the Somalis' point of view because, you know, their casualty rate must have been horrific. Like they get cut down by the dozen in this film. But yeah, like I think it was really just, I guess, meant to be a story of survival against the odds. And yeah, there's some pretty awesome, pretty awful scenes as well. Like where their Humvee gets blown up by RPGs, and like, you know, one guy's lying on the ground. There's like nothing below his waist. Basically, he's been blown in half. Just stuff like that. Like some really gruesome death scenes. But also the like incredible acts of heroism. And yeah, I think it's just a really well done movie.
Yeah, do you know one of the bits that stuck out for me in that is because they've got US Army Rangers, but then also like some Delta Force guys.
Yes.
I mean, so they're all technically special forces, but I think Delta is just, you know, another level. And there's one bit when there's in the middle of a gunfight and the Ranger Sergeant sort of screaming orders to who's one of the guys, Eric Banner, and Eric Banner is just like, yeah, okay, I heard you, like, calm down, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Do you remember that bit?
Yeah, I think the way the operation was structured is that the Delta Force guys were to go in and assault the building and capture the enemy commander, and then the Rangers would come in to back them up and help them evacuate because the Rangers were less experienced. In terms of, like, obviously they were still elite troops, but they didn't have the same level, like you say, as the Delta Force guys. I think it's Tom Sizemore who's in this. He's got this weird thing that he never ducks whenever like bullets are coming his way. So like there's times when he's they get to a helicopter crash site in their convoy where they're going to evacuate people. And everyone else is like hiding behind cover and stuff. He just walks straight towards them, like with his head up, and just like there's rounds coming in around him and stuff. He just doesn't give a shit. It's fucking great.
Yeah, it's like Robert Duvall in Apocalypse Now, when everyone else is sort of ducking it whenever there's artillery fire, and he just doesn't at all. Doesn't seem to faze him one tiny bit. And you can only imagine that there are guys like that in war. That you know, I think that is real. I imagine there must be, in fact, guys that are sort of desensitized or kind of used to it, and I think that's maybe real. It's funny that even Tom Sizemore, as sort of sang-froid as he is, as cool as he is, Eric Banner's character is like way more chilled than that, even.
Yeah, yeah. Eric Banner is just a machine in that movie. Like, because at the end of it, they're going to go back out there and like look for more missing men or whatever, and like he should have really just bowed out at that point because he's been fighting for like 24 hours straight, but he just goes straight back out there with them. He's ready to go.
you know. And again, it's just, I assume the real guy that he's based on did that, in which case that's pretty incredible act of courage, you know. I think the other bit that always stuck in my head is there's one moment where a chopper gets shot down and there's no ground forces available to assist them. Like there's one guy, I think, who survived the crash. And so two Delta Force guys just go in to try and get him out, knowing that they're probably not going to make it, but they're willing to go in anyway, and they make this incredible like last stand. They take down like a couple of dozen enemies with them. But again, just the bravery of doing something like that, knowing that you're probably not going to survive it, that's next level.
Yeah, the strength.
Yeah,
the strength to do that. Yeah, it's quite something, isn't it? I mean, I'm sort of just a normal human who would like to sort of try and save my own skin at any given moment. But there are guys out there. There are guys out there that are just prepared to risk everything on an incredible long shot. It's incredible, really, isn't it, that men like that do exist?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're sitting here in our comfortable offices with our beer in hand, talking about this, and like, what danger do we ever experience? But like, yeah, to actually be in that situation and to do stuff like that, takes a certain kind of person, I think, and there's not many people that would be able to do that. There's a good question here actually that just came up. Do you think the older war movies portray the events better than modern films? I'm always a little bit like, I'll make certain allowances for the older films when it comes to the authenticity of the battle scenes. And I don't know if you're the same, but like, you get modern movies like Saving Private Ryan, where you can show a lot of gore and the real results of battle and people swearing, all that sort of thing. That was a more difficult thing to do 30, 40 years ago, because there was much stricter rules about what you could show on screen. And so battles were probably a lot more sanitized in these older movies. So I'll make allowances for that. But in terms of the strength of the writing and the performances that the actors give, I think a lot of them still measure up pretty well, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think that in our modern, right now, I think that our society in the West has sort of lost its mind with regard to Nazis.
Yeah,
absolutely lost its mind. And it's funny, you see war films from sort of the 50s or the 60s or the 70s, and the Nazis are portrayed as the bad guys, of course, the enemy, the antagonists, but they're not universally painted as like demonic, like evil creations. They're just the other side. They're just the Germans. I think that's quite different. In a fair few films we've mentioned, the Germans, they're not like these inhuman evil monsters. They're just guys. They're just conscripts. And so it's interesting. And what you say there is actually true. That obviously back in the day, in say the 60s or the 70s, you weren't able to say and show such explicit things quite often. But yet I feel like the end result is more authentic. But I mean, I don't know. I wasn't in World War II, so obviously it's hard to say what is or isn't more authentic. But
I think it's good. Like you made the point there, though, about a lot of these movies kind of showing the other side, and that's why something like Das Boot is really interesting, because it shows that these guys who had to crew U-boats that were quite often portrayed as the bad guys for obvious reasons in a lot of movies, that they were ultimately just people that were there to do a job. They probably didn't particularly enjoy it, and they were probably working in horrible conditions a lot of the time, as you see in the movie. But that's what they had to do. And there's films like what was the one I referenced, where it's like the Bridget Remagen, which I really like. Again, it shows the Germans, they're just there because they've been ordered to be there. And as the movie progresses, both sides get increasingly ground down and desperate. And they're just guys that are just trying to survive, I suppose. So, yeah, like, I guess in a war like that,
the average German soldier wasn't a Nazi. He was just a guy. Like there was only a small proportion, I think, that were actually part of the Nazi party or whatever, or that really believed that kind of ideology. So it's good to get that balance sometimes and remind people of that, I suppose.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing in history. Sort of the Wehrmacht, the German army. How Nazi were they? And it's quite interesting because, of course, the SS divisions were, of course, staunchly National Socialist. But yeah, how Nazi was the average member of the Wehrmacht? And it's interesting because there's this one thing with the British did towards the end of the war. We had a prisoner of war camp set in prisoner of war camp. We had a country house. I can't remember which one it was now. There was a country house in the south of England somewhere, which was put aside to hold lots and lots of German top brass that had been captured. And what we did was actually bug the entire place, including all the grounds, like all the outside benches where anyone would sit. It was all bugged by the intelligence services. And so what we did is we just listened to all these sort of German generals and admirals and field marshals and things that we'd got, listened to them when they thought they weren't being recorded. Like I say, even on a bench outside where they were convinced no one was listening.
Yeah.
And you get insights into how much of a National Socialist they were. And the reality is quite interesting. The reality is that some generals and colonels and things were absolutely staunch Nazis, completely on board with the with the entire project, and others not at all. Not at all. When they realised that the Einsatz group and the special action groups, the work groups, were coming in behind them and exterminating certain communities on the Eastern Front, some of them were aghast to realise that was happening. And they thought it was completely dishonourable and not in the tradition of the Wehrmacht or anything. And others, as I say, were just complete Nazis. So it is interesting, and this idea now that every German, whether you're in the army or not, every German was just a Nazi, an evil Nazi. Well, no, I'm afraid that's not the real reality of things. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, even nowadays on the Young Turks the other day, they was trying to paint that everyone white was responsible for the Holocaust. It's like, no, I'm afraid that's not the reality.
I think, I wouldn't put too much stock in what the Young Turks have to say about anything, really. There was one here, actually, what's the Sub versus Destroyer movie with Robert Mitchum? That is The Enemy Below. It's got Kurt Jurgens in it as a U-boat commander, which is, again, it's a really good film, and it kind of comes into that same thing that we were saying there, where the U-boat guys are really just portrayed as a regular old crew, and it's really just a cat and mouse kind of story, with one side trying to hunt the other. And by the end, both ships get destroyed, and the two crews have to work to rescue each other, basically. And yeah, I think it's quite a nice way of showing, I guess, that there's still humanity in war. That people can still show compassion towards each other. So yeah, I quite like The Enemy Below. It's a good film. It was almost on my list, actually. But yeah, so that was my one, was Black Hawk Down. I don't know what
was that your number 3 pick, was it?
That was my number 3, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to pick one which is probably not that well known, and it might be right on the cusp of what you could say was a war film. It's set during a war, but it's not completely about that war as such. Anyway, it's The Duelists.
The Duelists?
Heard of it?
Oh, I've heard of it. I don't think I've seen it, though.
It's, in my opinion, it's a truly great movie. If I had a top 10 list of films of any genre, I think The Duelist would make it on the list. It's from the 70s again, and it's Ridley Scott's first feature film. And it's got Harvey Keitel in it, and Keith Carradine, brother of David Carradine. And again, it's based on a Conrad short story, which is based very loosely on real events, of these two French cavalrymen, hussars. This is in the Napoleonic era, so the very early 19th century. And there's a small... how to describe it? So you haven't seen it before?
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, the first thing I would say about it is that it looks superb. it's beautiful, actually, without going too over the top. It's like a jewel. It's like a cut and polished jewel of a movie. I do think it's among the best looking movies I've ever seen. Ridley Scott, before he was a sort of feature film director, he directed lots and lots of adverts, like 200 odd adverts. And sometimes high budget, high quality adverts are sort of more cinematic than actual movies sometimes. Do you know what I mean? And he was known as this guy that did extremely high budget, extremely good looking, extremely polished adverts.
Didn't he direct the Apple advert?
I don't know, I'm afraid.
The sort of 1984 parody kind of thing where the woman comes in and smashes a hammer through the screen.
Oh, I know the one. I don't know if that was Ridley Scott. I can't say, I'm afraid.
Jack can maybe help me on this one, but I think it might have been.
But they tried to make, apparently there was a project where they tried to make this before, and it didn't quite get off the ground. But anyway, Ridley Scott, it was like his first shot when a studio gave him sort of nearly $1 million to make a film. And it's honestly really, really, the cinematography is just amazing. Almost every shot is like almost like a painting. Have you ever seen The Girl with the Pearl Earring? Or have you seen Wolf Hall, the BBC Wolf Hall?
Yeah.
Quite a lot of the shots in that are they're almost like an oil painting. It's incredible. It's a feast for the eye. Well, the Duelists is that. I really do think, a lot of effort. Everything was like just so. It's just perfect. And anyway, of course, it's set during the Napoleonic era, so like the Napoleonic Wars are the backdrop. But it's really about these two guys that keep having duels. So the Harvey Keitel character is sort of this hothead, crazy kind of dude that can't be reasoned with and keeps having duels with people at the drop of a hat. Like some people are just sort of a bit aggro, sort of looking for a fight.
Yeah, just hotheads, yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of guys out there that are like that. And so anyway, Harvey Keitel's character is like that. And he has, the film basically opens with him having a duel with a guy with swords against the early 19th century. And so, which wasn't really allowed even in the early 19th century. It was it was certainly frowned upon, and it was sort of semi-allowed, but not really, especially if you kill the guy. It's sort of hard to argue that it isn't, an unlawful killing. Anyway, there's still all these things in place about honor, when your honor has been besmirched and you demand satisfaction and all that sort of thing. Anyway, in the film, the plot of it is that Keith Carradine, another similarly ranked cavalry officer, is sent to find Harvey Keitel and tell him that he needs to go and report back to division, or he needs to report back to the staff headquarters or whatever, and answer for himself why he's had this duel. And Harvey Keitel's character decides to be offended that Keith Carradine has done this in front of a woman. See, he finds him in the town, and he goes up to him as soon as he finds him, and he's standing next to a woman, and he tells him, you must come with me. You're sort of under arrest of a type. You must come with me now to answer for yourself. And Harvey Keitel sort of takes it upon himself to be offended by that, and offers Keith Carradine out for a duel. And it's completely irrational and unreasonable. And they have a duel, and it's not really, no one wins particularly, so satisfaction hasn't been got. And so anyway, the rest of the film really is these guys over many years, over like the next 20 years plus of their lives, keep meeting up at different points during the Napoleonic War and having a duel with each other. And they have sort of, 4, 5, 6 different duels with different types of swords. And there's one point when they're on horseback and they charge each other. Anyway, I don't want to give away the end or anything, but I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't seen it, and I don't want to sort of oversell it too much. But for me, it's I don't think going over the top by calling it really beautiful as a film.
So they have duels, but like presumably neither one wins definitively. Like do they keep getting interrupted or something before they can finish?
Yeah, that's right. At one point, Harvey Keitel sort of wins one, but not really. And then the one on horseback, Harvey Keitel essentially loses it, but neither are killed.
Yeah.
And so, they sort of just about fail to kill each other every time.
Right.
But I think it's one of the sort of themes of the film, which I think is really interesting, is so how do you deal with someone who is completely unreasonable? I don't know if you've had it in real life, maybe when you're at school or something like that, or you've had sort of a nightmare neighbour from hell or someone, where they can't be reasoned with, and so you're dealing with someone that's maybe kind of out of their mind a bit. Maybe you've seen it in a bar. Someone will come up to you or say like, "Are you looking at me or something?" And you say no, and they say, "Oh, I'm a liar now."
Yeah,
it's quite easy to pick a fight with someone out of for no reason. If you really want to, it can be done. And anyway, this is what this sort of Harvey Keitel's character does. Really, it's just like this complete arsehole, just a bully of a man. And like, so how do you deal with that? And they won't stop. They're not going to stop. And so anyway, it all comes to a head by the end of the film. But I just love it. It's in places it's quite slow, so it's not sort of action packed. But the cinematography, it looks great, and the plot is sort of spot on. It's not too difficult or contrived. It's a pretty straightforward story, and it's not a massively long film. But I just think the characters are very, very well realised. The script is very good, and I sort of can't fault it. I wouldn't give many films a 10 out of 10, but the Duelists I would.
I think Ridley Scott's always been known for the great cinematography in his movies. Especially you look at things like Blade Runner and stuff, like they're visually beautiful, and he's always continued that tradition, I guess. They always look, I don't know how to put it, but they always look like worlds that are really lived in his movies. They never just look like film sets. They're like, it feels like a place that people have been using for generations. It really feels like a lived in environment, and I think that's the hallmark of good cinematography.
One of the things about the Duelists is the lighting. Quite often things will be sort of heavily in shadow, and a lot of the times when things are outside, it's clearly sort of daybreak or dusk, one or the other, but the shadows are very long. And, it's just, I can't sort of overstate it enough that it looks, a lot of it looks like an oil painting. And you're absolutely right, Ridley Scott is known for that, isn't he? But somehow, like his first full film, it's, if anything, I would say it's the best one for that, because there's lots of films, aren't there? Lots and lots of films, Blade Runner or Gladiator, they look amazing. But this, I would say, if anything, somehow with a smaller budget and as a younger man, he sort of hit the heights of it in his first film. I love it. But if you haven't seen it, we can't really bounce off each other too much. But
I
would, if I could sort of recommend any one film to anyone who hasn't seen it, please do check out the Duelists. I think it's.
I'm. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a note here with an actual pencil. So I'm going to add it to my list because.
Oh, cool! I think you'll enjoy it. I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy it.
No, I'm going to give that a go actually because, it's a Ridley Scott film that I haven't seen, so you need to give it a go. But I apologize that I haven't seen it, so we can't really compare notes on this one.
No worries, of course not. It's one of the ones actually that I wouldn't want to particularly spoil for people, because it was one of those films you must have seen a fair few films in your time where you've not heard of it before. You just turn on the telly and you're effectively discovering it for the first time on your own. And I happened to do that with the Duelists and just realised, what is this? What is this movie? It's so good. Like, how has no one heard of it? Most people have never heard of it. So if I could get at least one or two people to see it, I feel like your life will be enriched for having watched it.
Nice. Right, it's on my list. So speaking of lists, though, my number 2 pick, so like my second best, basically, it is Platoon. I'm going into Vietnam this one. Obviously, I'm kind of glad that you picked Apocalypse Now because I always kind of put them together, Platoon and Apocalypse Now, even though I know they were made in different decades, but they've both got a sheen in them. And for some reason, I always just liked Platoon more. I don't know why. I think probably because it's less bleak in terms of its ending. There's a slight element of optimism to it. and I think it's, in a lot of ways, I guess it's a more conventional movie. It's not quite as batshit crazy as Apocalypse Now is, but I think in terms of the characters and the way the story unfolds, and the action scenes are fantastic. William Dafoe and Tom Berenger, kind of representing like the good and bad aspects of human nature, are just brilliant in their roles. And Charlie Sheen's character is just kind of caught in the middle between the two of them. I just think, it's a fantastic movie. I can't really fault it, to be honest.
He does say that he feels that Barnes and Elias are like his fathers in some sense, doesn't he?
It's like they're kind of fighting for his soul. That's the way he describes it. Elias is obviously the more righteous sort of guy. He's more chilled. He's really just there to get out, basically. He's there to do his job, keep his men alive, and get out. And Barnes is the much more like vicious killer, who's completely ruthless. Both men have got like a kind of group around them that's loyal to them. So like the platoon is kind of split down the middle between the two of them, until obviously Barnes takes care of Elias eventually. And you get that iconic scene of him like, arms upraised in slow motion when he gets shot. So it's just, brilliant stuff. The battle scene at the end where everyone just kind of loses their minds a little bit, and like all control just breaks down. Like the Viet Cong are everywhere, and they end up having to call down an airstrike on their own lines. Brilliant stuff. I love that scene as well where Barnes is out in the jungle, and he's about to murder Charlie Sheen, and he's got like a shovel. I think that's what they've been reduced to. Like they've run out of ammunition, and he's just about to like cave his head in with it. The camera just goes right in on his eyes, and like there's the fire of the napalm and everything is behind him, and it's just backlit by that, and like there's just absolute madness and insanity in his eyes. It's just incredible the way it's done. I just think it's a brilliant movie.
Barnes is a badass, and of course Tom Berenger with sort of his scarred up face, is convincing, absolutely convincing. When I mentioned Lucy Liu not being convincing as sort of a violent, sort of intimidating, scary presence, Barnes in Platoon really is. I mean, that's great acting, where you really do feel that this is a stone cold killer. Because of course it's Oliver Stone, isn't it? And Stone was in Nam, wasn't he, in real life?
Yes, he was. Yeah. So, he's in it. He gets a cameo in it as well.
Oh, is he? When's he in it?
He's one of the guys in like the command hut. Like there's right at the climax of the battle, like a Viet Cong breaks through their lines with like a couple of hand grenades and just runs straight into their bunker and blows himself up. And like
Oliver Stone's in there, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's also, I think, the first movie that you see a guy called Dale Dye, who's another real soldier. Like he served in Nam, I think, and then he came on as a military advisor and started getting roles in movies, much like Army. And this is one of the first times you see him. He's the guy who calls in the airstrike against their own lines because it's the only way to clear out the Viet Cong. And you start seeing him in loads of movies. He was in for the next 20 years, like whenever you needed like a commander type guy, he'd probably be there.
Yeah, the grey-haired dude, right?
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
When he calls him, when there's Charlie inside the wire.
Yeah.
Expend all remaining ordnance inside my pod. Yeah. It's funny. I've seen Platoon a bunch, like too much really. I probably watched it 10 times or something. Again, had it on VHS when I was growing up. So anything I had on VHS growing up, I've seen too much. But yeah, I watched Platoon tons. There's a bit in that where, I don't know why, it's funny how different things affect you, isn't it? But there's a bit in that which I did, again, maybe I was a bit too young, probably about 13 or something. And it's a bit relatively near the beginning where they go into some hut and Bunny, Bunny, the young white dude, and he smashes some old lady's head to bits with the butt of his gun.
Yeah, and he's like,
he says, I've never seen a head come apart like that before. He says it laughing.
Yeah, he's gone like his Bunny.
I remember being affected by that for some reason because it's so nasty. It's just so nasty. Oh, he smashes her head to bits in front of all the kids and stuff. And I don't know why, because there's more gruesome things in films I'd seen and more sort of sadistic things, perhaps. But for some reason, that bit, like his smirk, I don't know, just affected me a bit. And still to this day, I mean, I did consider having Platoon on my list. So yeah, I do think it's a great Nam film. Well, yeah, without question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Matt Dillon, I think, that plays Bunny. And I think he's an example of like Barnes basically bringing out the worst in people. You know, he's a guy who obviously has tendencies like that, but a better officer would have been able to curb it and keep him under control, whereas Barnes just almost encourages it. And there's, I'm trying to think of this other guy. I think it's John C. McGinley who's in it. Basically, the guy from Scrubs.
O'Neill.
Yeah. And so he's kind of a coward, this guy. He tries to get out of the platoon just before the final battle because he says to Barnes, look, I've got a bad feeling about this one. I've got like, you know, I'm due to rotate back into the world again for a while. Can I just go now? Can you just let me go, please? And Barnes just says, everyone's got to die. And just kind of pats him on the shoulder and walks away. But he does survive. I think he puts a dead body on top of him and just plays dead.
Yeah.
And then, like at the end of the battle, the CEO just asks him how he's feeling, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm all right," thinking he's going to get out of there. And because he's the last sort of survivor as a senior officer, he's told like, "Well, that's great because you got command of the platoon now." And you just see this look on his face, like, "Oh, Christ, no."
Yeah, no, that's bloody great. He's the O'Neill. He's a little bit of sort of comic relief in that film, a bit, isn't he? Like you see him at one point talking about the old O'Neill death grip that he would put on people, and it's obviously bullshit. It's obviously bullshit. But he's so short. That's what they call it, isn't it? When your time in country, you haven't got long left. They say you're short.
Yeah.
And O'Neill was so short he could parachute off a dime or something. I remember them saying. I don't know if it's that film. I might have mixed that line up with another.
He's just desperate to get out of there, basically.
Yeah. And he's sort of really cowardly, isn't he? He sort of hides under a body in a foxhole all night. But not really what you want in a Marine. But nonetheless, it's a great film. I think that Oliver Stone, some of his films are a little bit hit and miss. Some are absolutely amazing, aren't they? Like Nixon and JFK. Platoon is a good one. I have seen an interview with Oliver Stone talking about his experiences in Nam, in country. But I would like to know more about how much Charlie Sheen's character is just him. I don't know that in detail. I don't know if you know sort of how authentic that was.
Yeah, I don't know how closely it mirrors his own experiences. I just know that like he's obviously able to bring a certain amount of authenticity to it, and I think having guys like Dale Dye on board who fought there as well, there's a pretty good team of people working on your movie. For me, like definitely one of the best war movies ever made, and for me probably my favorite Vietnam film out of all of them.
For me, it's certainly up there. I mean, I think put Apocalypse Now above it, but only slightly. It's funny. Is it Hot Shots Part 2 when Martin Sheen and Charlie Sheen cross each other in boats?
And they go like, "I loved you in Wall Street."
That's it. That's the one. Yes, great bit.
Oh, I love the Hot Shots movies. Both of them were fantastic. I actually think I like the second one more. I just love all the parodies. Oh, it's great. Especially when he's doing the stick fighting at the beginning, and he's like dipping his hands into like it's meant to be glue, but then he's got like a selection of sweets and stuff that he can put it into.
Hundreds and thousands, isn't it? Because it's like a parody of, is it Kickboxer or
it's either Kickboxer or Rambo 3.
Where it's supposed to be glass, isn't it? In the original, they get wrapped hands with then glue and then broken glass. and then
Yeah.
he's got hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. Oh, it's great fun. And that does actually bring us to our top ones, or for me anyway, like my number one. But I was going to suggest we just do a couple more super chats just to try and
Sure.
get through them before we reveal our favorites. What was the next one? James McDonough says, Drinker, my fellow Scotsman, check out Don't Breathe 2 and Midnight Mass. My favorite war movie is Saving Private Ryan. I think a lot of people are going to agree with you on that one. I haven't seen Don't Breathe 2 though, I'm afraid. But cheers for that. Farewell Thunderchild says, can't not catch. Well, lost £2, so War of the Worlds. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a war film, I suppose. It's got entire worlds at war with each other. Pete says, Cross of Iron, light family fare. That's been years since I've seen Cross of Iron, so I would need to rewatch that one. I remember quite liking it, though.
I've either not seen it or don't remember it. Is that from the 60s, Cross of Iron?
It's the 60s or the 70s. Let me just check.
Yeah, let me do it. Cross of Iron. It rings a bell, but Cross of Iron.
Yes, so it is 1977. Yeah, so 70s. So it's set on the Eastern Front.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that. Maybe that can go on my list. Looks good.
It was Sam Peckinpah that directed it, so good pedigree there. What's the next one? Deleted Scenes says, Hail Drinker and History Bro and Chat. I would like to include the 1984 Charlie Mopic, a Vietnam War movie that never gets mentioned but always stayed with me. Charlie Mopic? I
don't know that either, I must admit.
No, I don't know what that one is, mate. Sorry. Russman says, well done, gents. Hail. Thank you, man. And thanks for the super chat. Patient Elijah says, hey, Drinker, long story short, I'm writing a research paper on birth order and how it affects each child in the family. Continue to the next super chat. So I'm surveying people for my research. So if you don't mind me asking, do you have any siblings? And if so, are you the oldest, youngest, etc.? I'm an only child, so I don't have any siblings. So hopefully that answers your question. George says, History Bro, hey, Bo. Hey, bro. Nice to see Carl finally let you out. Drinker, start over. I was late. Any plans for some Newfoundland content, boys? Newfoundland content? I don't know. What can I do on that?
Canadian content? I don't follow, sorry.
Neither do I. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Munchkin says, both Peter Jackson and Mel Gibson wanted to remake The Dam Busters. Stephen Fry wrote the script for it, but no one knows what to do about the dog's name, which in the original was the N-word. Yeah. You wouldn't get away with that these days. Yeah.
There's loads of things you wouldn't get away with. There's a bit in Full Metal Jacket when they're going to take a woman, a prostitute, away. They're going to have turns on this poor Vietnamese prostitute. And the black guy is going to go first, and the white guy...
She's like, he's too big.
Yeah, too Boku. And the white guy, the machine gunner dude, the M60 machine gunner dude, says, I'm going first. And then he says, all N-words must hang.
Yeah.
That's the line. He just leaves it there. And everyone,
yeah, it just goes.
That would not get in a film now. Because no one kicks back against it. Everyone's like, yeah. You know, it's like, wow, how times have changed. But
it's authentic. Because it's the kind of... It's the kind of dialogue you would get at that time period.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Animal Mother. Yeah.
Animal Mother. Yes.
What's the next one? Simple Jack says, I'm a long-time infantry veteran. Please know Hurt Locker is the worst, stupidest modern combat war movie ever. There's nothing at all real in that depiction. Nothing. Okay. Hey, man. I mean, I'll take your word for it then if you're a vet. Yeah.
I have seen that, and I thought not much of it. I don't remember hardly anything of it, which speaks volumes. But I have seen it. But
I'm pretty sure it was her who did. What's her fucking name? Yeah, Catherine Bigelow, I think, who directed it.
I think that sounds right. I think that's.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's obviously it's less about the sort of frontline infantry guys, and it's more about like bomb disposal, that sort of thing. So I've got no idea how authentic it might be. I remember it being a bit of a slow burner,
Mm.
but I don't think I loved it or hated it. Really, I was just kind of like, nah, it's all right, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those films where there's quite a lot of their sort of private life, their personal relationships. I seem to remember, and I just don't care about that at all. That's why a film like The Great Escape, for example, is great, because there's no love interest. There's like no women in it at all, really. It's just all about the plot. It's just pure plot from start to finish. And well, yeah, I can't beat that in my opinion.
Yeah. Could I just make a suggestion as well? I think you might be sitting a bit far away from your microphone because you're just coming in a little bit faint.
Okay, I'll bring it a bit closer.
Yeah.
Okay, try and do that.
That's cool. It's just for the people like listening. I don't know if like we might have a bit of like imbalance. Like maybe I'm blasting their eardrums out and you're a bit more quiet.
Okay. I feel like you've probably got all the top-notch equipment, and I've got a crappy. Well, it's not that crappy, but I've got sort of a not particularly professional microphone, so it might be.
That's all right. I'm on a Blue Snowball microphone, man. This is like the cheapest of the cheap. I really need to get a new one, actually. Roger Zimmerman says, as a kid, Alistair MacLean was one of my favourite novelists. Where Eagles Dare, Guns of Navarone, Force 10 from Navarone, Ice Station Zebra, to name a few. Yeah, there's classics there. I love the Guns of Navarone. Ice Station Zebra was a great, like, slow burner sort of Cold War movie. That was really good fun.
Richard good fun film. Again, I believe. Ice Station Zebra is superb. That might get in my top 10. It did cross my mind actually, but it's not really a war film. I mean, it could maybe argue it's a Cold War film.
It's an espionage sort of film, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more espionage, and I think it's superb. That might probably make it my top 20 films of all time. I would have thought.
Yeah.
Quick side note on that. You know, Howard Hughes. Is it Howard Hughes that was the billionaire dude that they made with Leonardo DiCaprio? He was obsessed with that film. He would lock himself away and watch that film over and over and over and over again, apparently.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, he obviously had OCD or something, but still.
That's weird. I love that. So what's the next one? James McDonough says, Drinker, you should do a Halloween stream. What's your favourite scary movie? I am going to be on Halloween streams. I'm going to be doing EFAP on that day. So, yeah, I think there's another one I'm going to be doing too. I can't quite remember, but I've written it down somewhere. So I'll be doing 2 streams on Halloween, the actual day, which will be fun because I'm going to be out the night before. But, yeah, I'll get through it. Favorite scary movie ever? Damn, I mean, because I've been reviewing a lot of them recently. Like, I loved watching American Werewolf in London again. I really like Dog Soldiers as a horror movie. That's great fun. I love Alien, like the original horror movie in space. Like, just great films that just totally draw me in. Big fan of The Shining as well. Love that film. Brilliant work from Kubrick. I think he can create an unsettling atmosphere like nobody else.
Yeah, The Shining is something else, really. I can't think of any real parallels to the psychological tension generated in that film. I don't know quite how it's done. It's superb.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, things like that. Like, you know, so many of the modern horror films that you get now are kind of they rely on gore. You know, and that's got its place, but like I never really gave a shit about the Saw movies or the Hostel movies because it's just like, yeah, it's just torture porn, and that's just boring for me. It doesn't really generate tension.
Yeah.
Well,
that whole thing of suddenly having a loud noise. It's a bit,
yeah.
bit shit, really. It's not...
Sorry, I am struggling to hear you a little bit here. I might need to.
Oh, really? Oh, damn.
It's maybe my earphones actually. Probably. No, I don't think it's you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. I got both of them in, so I can hear a bit better now. Yeah, I've got a question there saying, "Oh, The Thing." Yeah, that's a fantastic horror
the
movie.
original one. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. So I was just trying to think of something off the top of my head that I would answer, and I couldn't think of anything. But The Thing, that's genuinely scary. There's hardly any films I think that are really scary, certainly as an adult. But The Thing, I think maybe it's got a good shout. Even as a completely rational adult man, I still find it a bit. Well, it's unnerving, isn't it? It's unsettling.
It's disturbing, and I think it's almost at its best early in the movie when it's more about paranoia of it, like who might be infected with this thing. I love the bit where they corner one of the guys who's been infected by it, and like he seems normal until like you see his hand and it's all like deformed and stuff, and then he just starts making this weird noise, and that's when I think they torch him with the flamethrowers, But yeah, just good unsettling stuff like that.
I remember there's one bit in it where they've tied a bunch of people to a bench or a chair, and they find out that one of them is infected and one of them isn't, but they're both tied to this chair. And you know the bit, and the one that is infected just starts eating or destroying the uninfected one. That is truly horrific. Like the horror of that,
not being able to get away from it.
The word horror,
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a good one.
No, absolutely. People referencing Blair Witch here as well. That one totally passed me by back in the day. I remember watching it, but it was like I was only about 14 or 15, I think, when it came out. And so it was like I couldn't see it at the cinema. So my mate got like a bootleg copy and we watched it. But it was like the middle of the afternoon on a bright sunny day. It was like the worst possible situation to be watching a film like Blair Witch Project. And so we were just laughing our asses off the whole way through, like it meant nothing. And it's a shame. I wished I'd watched it in its proper format. I think it would have been a lot better.
It's funny, actually. I did see that at the cinema, I think, on Halloween. It might not have been, but I certainly saw it at the cinema. And I do remember thinking it was, I sort of bought into it a bit. I do remember thinking it was a bit unsettling, certainly the very end bit.
Yeah.
But no more than that. I thought, it gives me a little bit of a chill up my spine for like 5 seconds.
It was the novelty, I think.
No one had ever really done it no one had really made a film quite like that, had they, before?
Yeah, and the marketing campaign was genius because it was like the first movie that made use of the internet, which was in its infancy back then, like 1999, I think it came out. But they did the first like viral marketing campaign where they really maintained the illusion that this was a real found documentary.
Yeah, they
kind
did,
of, which was just so ahead of its time. I mean, it's been done to death now, and it would mean nothing. But like, someone had to come up with the idea first, and I think it was them. And I just think that's cool that they did it. But yeah, what's the next one here? Bear Business says, money for man movies. Hail the must-see Thursday content. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. I'm glad you're liking it. James Savick says, please don't forget to mention In Harm's Way. I'm going to have to look that up, actually.
It's ringing a bell, but not much more than that.
It is...
Why?
I'm just waiting to see if it comes up, actually. It's not. Come on. Find it. Oh, yeah, here it goes. So it's an American epic. Stars John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, and Patricia Neal.
Oh, it's a John Wayne effort. Right.
Yeah. Right, so it's based on several U.S. naval officers in Hawaii. So it must be about Pearl Harbor, then. Okay.
Cool. Looks like it'd be a good one. 1965. Yeah. So
it's got Wayne in it. It's all right.
Yeah. Marion.
Yeah, Marion. Yeah. What a name. I think John Wayne was a bit of an upgrade.
Yeah.
So Trickster King says, do you only classify a woke character as when someone's character is defined only by their gender or race or sexuality? I think that's probably a good indicator that the character is woke. I think if they act in ways that's not servicing the plot, but it's rather just servicing the message that the author wants to put in or the writer wants to put in, that's a pretty good indicator that they are a woke character. And then, yeah, you can pretty much tell that the movie's going to be a stinker as a result. Yeah, so that would be one of my main things. If you find that characters act in ways that are not realistic like the ones we referenced before, where like you had Lucy Liu there, who's meant to be like this big intimidating figure that no one's really going to find scary, or a female character that's able to beat up guys twice her size. Yeah, that's pretty woke. So those are just general indicators, I would say.
I watched one of the John Wick films for the first time on TV the other day. I've completely let that pass me by. I'm not interested in John Wick. But one of them was on TV just the other day, and I watched about 40 minutes of it. And it seemed to be like just was it Halle Berry? I think was in it. Is that right? Halle Berry? Is that
yeah.
right?
So she was in John Wick 3. Yeah.
Right, and she just kept beating up loads of guys and shooting them in the head at point blank range. It was like shooting people in the head at point blank range porn. And it was just so unbelievable. It was just so. I mean, it's not that I'm squeamish or anything, but it was so gratuitous. I don't really mean that in the true sense of like gore or anything, but it's just keep shooting guys at point blank range in the face. It's like, really?
I think that's kind of a hallmark of the John Wick movies, where it's like Keanu Reeves will do some kind of takedown, like hand to hand, like, and the guy will be on the ground, then he'll just put 2 rounds in his head and move on to the next guy. And I think those movies are kind of an example of like the law of diminishing returns. Like the first one was this like really surprise sleeper hit that was awesome. The second one, they capitalized on it and kind of expanded the lore, and then the third one, it just went a bit over the top, and that's
okay. So maybe I'm looking at like the Rambo effect, the way Rambo 2 and 3 are just ridiculously over the top compared to First Blood, which is actually brilliant.
I think it's like they were always under pressure, I think, to top what had come before, and that's why you get like John Wick 3 just being kind of ridiculous. It does have a dog getting used in combat though, which is quite cool, because Halle Berry's got a dog, doesn't she? That she sicks it on people and it just like rips them to pieces.
That was the sort of the 40-minute window of it I saw, that someone shot one of her dogs and she just went apeshit and killed an entire compound full of guys.
Yeah. It's interesting because John Wick 2 has Ruby Rose in it as a bad guy, as like a assassin or something. She can't speak, which is probably to the benefit of the movie. But it was really surprising because Wick actually beats her in a fight and kills her. I was like, damn, there's not many movies that would allow that these days. Like a man beating a woman in a fight. What is this?
Sounds terribly toxic.
I know. He gets her bad as well, like because they're fighting with knives and like he's about to stab her. She puts her hand up to stop him, and it goes right through her, and then he just like shoves it straight into her chest. Like, damn, that's brutal. But yeah, the second one was all right. That's for sure. Right, what was the next one I had? Mitch Balizchuk says, I just got here. Has Hacksaw Ridge been mentioned yet? What an unexpected masterpiece. We did talk about Hacksaw Ridge a little bit. I watched it with Shad and we discussed it. I quite liked it. The gore effects and stuff are fantastic. And I think Andrew Garfield does a good performance in it. Probably not one of my favorite war movies, but definitely a good film.
Yeah, I only saw that once relatively soon after it came out, and my impressions of it were that it was quite good. Not the best war film I've ever seen, but really quite good. I should rewatch it again. Really, I should. Just while we're on that subject, the one film I haven't seen, which I really want to see, I hope it's not maybe your number one or anything, but is the film 1917. I haven't seen that, but it looks way up my alley, and I really want to see that because I suspect I'll love it from everything I've seen and heard.
It like as a technical achievement, it's an incredible movie. To do those huge continuous shots. Definitely a brilliantly made film. Not huge on plot or anything because there's not much to it. It's just all about the spectacle of it, I suppose. But yeah, it's definitely worth watching, I would say. What was I going to say? Yeah, so we could reveal our top movies.
Well, I've still got two.
Oh, have you?
Have you only got one left?
I've only got one, yeah, because Platoon was my number 2. So sorry, I thought you'd done yours. Oh yeah, you're one behind me actually, aren't you? So I apologize.
You went first. Okay, well, my number 2 pick is A Bridge Too Far. Have you seen that?
Damn. Yeah, I absolutely have. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
No, I'm actually amazed there's not been any crossover up until now. We avoided it pretty well, but yeah, that's my number 1, and good choice on your part, like.
Yeah, great minds think alike.
Indeed, yeah. Yeah, what a movie, and what a cast.
Oh god, it's everyone was in it, weren't they?
Everyone who was an A-lister in the 70s was in that movie. You know, Connery, you've got James Caan, you've got Michael Caine, Gene Hackman, like Robert Redford,
Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, Anthony Hopkins, yeah, like Robert Redford's in it as well, isn't he?
Yeah, Edward Fox, Lord Olivier.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone. Elliot Gould. I think you said Elliot Gould. Yeah, the cast is star-studded, isn't it? I mean, that's not really doing it justice. Yeah, everyone that was everyone wanted a piece of it, didn't they? And it's directed by Dickie Attenborough again, isn't it? The Lord Attenborough. So yeah, it's superb. Sorry, I'll let you wax lyrical about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you talk about epic war movies, and I think when it comes to the scale of it, and just the sheer spectacle of it, the cast, everything just comes together into this incredible movie. And for a movie that was, what is it, 1980? I think it was made, or late 70s.
Shot in 76, and it came out in 77, if I'm not mistaken.
So late 70s, but like pretty mature in terms of like the language, the level of violence in it, the kind of realism of the combat scenes, all of it just brilliant. And it gives you a really good sense of actually what's going on, because it's a pretty complex operation, the whole thing, like Operation Market Garden. You know, they had to capture all these different bridges. They had to, like, the paratroopers went in ahead of them, and then these ground forces had to roll in to like back them up. But you understood what the problems were and where it all started to fall apart. And you kind of get to see it from both sides as well. You get to understand what the Germans are facing. And yeah, it all comes together great. I can't fault it, really. For me, it's like the ultimate war movie. It's just kind of got everything.
Yeah, I really, really love it. It's just great. It's one of those films where I've seen it loads of times. I don't know, 10 times maybe. And if it's ever on TV, that's it. That's my evening sorted. I will watch it again, no question. Again, there's not really any women in it. I sound like I hate women or something, but there's no love interest. Nothing.
There's no
operational combat, and it's just straight into it. It's great.
Again, you know, you wouldn't be able to do that today because they would have to shoehorn in female characters somehow. You know, whether it's a French resistance fighter or something. And you know, when we're talking about this movie, I love the moments of like levity and British humor in it. Like when the paratroopers in Arnhem have been surrounded and the Germans offer them the chance to surrender. And I think it's Anthony Hopkins who says to them, "No, I'm afraid we can't accept your surrender. We don't have anywhere to put you." You know, just that brilliant attitude of like, "Nah, fuck you, we're not surrendering." Love it.
Yeah, he's Anthony Hopkins plays Major Frost, John Frost. Johnny Frost, who was actually at Arnhem. There's one great bit. One of my favourite bits in The Bridge Too Far is when Anthony Hopkins' brigade finally get to the bridge at Arnhem, and they have to commandeer some houses, some buildings to sort of set up a defensive perimeter. And there's a bit where I can't remember the exact wording of the line, but he knocks on a door and says, it's so terribly English. He sort of says something like, you know, I'm terribly sorry, but we have to commandeer your house. And it's as simple as that. It's, one of the things I would say about Operation Market Garden is that I sort of know about it in kind of stupid amounts of detail. Like it's one of those things, because I'm a history nerd first and foremost. I'm just a history nerd with a mic, not a film critic. There's a few things in history, a dozen or a couple of dozen points in history that I'm sort of semi-obsessed with and keep going back to again and again and again. And anyway, Operation Market Garden is one of those. I've read the book by Cornelius Ryan twice. I've listened to an audiobook a couple more times. I've read the book by Anthony Beevor, the historian Anthony Beevor, just called Arnhem. And I've sort of watched most documentaries about it. And so I actually know about it in sort of almost an embarrassing level of detail. And so, I just love it so much. I don't know why. It's because it's a failure, really, isn't it? That's one of the things, is that it is operationally quite a bad failure.
It's a tough one, because I think operationally, it achieved about 90% of its objectives. Like, they captured most of the bridges, but the problem is they had to capture all of them. They had to get all the way to Arnhem and capture everything in between. Otherwise, there was no way the thing could work. The whole point of it was, if this works, we can bypass the main bulk of the German army and strike straight into Germany and have the war over by Christmas. But it depended on everything working perfectly. And obviously it didn't. And they were hugely unlucky. Like, they ran into like an entire German division that had just been refitted, and that they were like fully, ready to go. Like an entire panzer division that they didn't expect to find there. You're not going to fight panzers with paratroopers, because they got nothing to take them on with. And that's the problem that they had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, this is I'm going to put my history fan's hat on. If I could just give it some sort of context, or broad context, is that we'd had D-Day, 6th of June 1944 is the magic day, and we'd broken out of those beachheads, and over the next few weeks and months, we'd eventually surrounded a lot of the Germans at the Falaise pocket, and we'd broken out we'd taken Paris, we'd taken most of Belgium. The Allies had taken most of Belgium. But then they had to stop for logistical reasons. You can't just endlessly push forward. You have to... Well, Eisenhower's plan was to have a broad front. He didn't want to just punch into Germany as quickly as possible at any point that he could do it. He wanted this broad front so that he couldn't really be counterattacked too much. Of course, there's the Battle of the Bulge and different things. But so at this point in sort of summer... 44, autumn 44, the high command, the Allied high command, and of course Eisenhower's got the last call on this. There was lots of different plans of what are we going to do next. So Patton famously and Omar Bradley wanted to send their tank divisions further south, straight into Germany, but Montgomery, our sort of most senior commander in the field, had this idea that he wanted to use the airborne divisions, because they hadn't been used up to this point. They'd had something like 16 different missions that they were supposed to go on that were called off at the last minute for all different reasons. And so the Allies had like this whole extra airborne army, it was 3 divisions in the end, the British 1st Brigade and the 82nd, American 82nd Airborne, the American 101st. And so Monty's plan was to... drop them. Well, Arnhem is the last bridge, a bridge too far, as one of the commanders, our commander Frederick Browning, was supposed to have said, although we don't think he probably did, but he was supposed to have said, "I think it's a bridge too far, sir." But as you said, the whole point is to get that last bridge that's across the Rhine, because the river that runs through the town of Arnhem in northern Holland is the Rhine. And if the Allies could have captured that bridge, well, there's actually 2 bridges in Arnhem. One was a railway bridge, and the other was a road bridge. And the Germans had blown up the railway bridge earlier. But so to capture the road bridge across Arnhem was the whole point of it, really. So to say that, we got all the other bridges, Eindhoven and Nijmegen. Well, that's all very well and good. Yeah, you can make the argument you've got sort of 80-90% of the objectives, but that's no good. The whole point was to capture that last one at Arnhem over the Rhine, because then they could punch straight into the Ruhr and into Germany. And the fact that they didn't get that bridge at Arnhem meant that the Allies didn't really cross into the Ruhr and Germany for like another 4 months. And by that point, the Soviets were on the outskirts of Berlin.
Yes, it was kind of irrelevant anyway by that point. See, I'd heard that the reason Monty was so aggressive with this one was that he was feeling like he'd been sidelined as a general in the command structure, and that he hadn't really played a major part in the D-Day operations, like the planning of it. Like, it had very much been an American operation, and I think he'd gained a reputation almost as being a cautious kind of commander. And so this was almost his way of countering that. Like, we've got a really bold airborne operation here that could potentially end the war, you know, by the end of this year if it works. And it was like his big gamble to prove that he could stage a major operation like this. And clearly he couldn't, and it was a bit of a fuck up, really.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's ultimately a failure, like Dunkirk. Dunkirk is really, if you look at it just on black and white on paper, it's sort of a humiliation, really, and yet we'll make a virtue of it.
I think that's the British way, isn't it? Because we have so many failures and problems that we're like, we'll celebrate it because it didn't go completely wrong.
Yeah, like Isandlwana or Zulu, Rorke's Drift. Yeah, kind of a failure on a couple of different levels, but you can find great things in it as well at the same time. And I think that's what the Operation Market Garden is. I mean, it was the biggest ever airborne raid ever. I mean, something like 40,000 guys, let's say 3 divisions. There's a Polish brigade as well with Gene Hackman is the leader of the Poles, isn't he, in the film?
Mm-hmm.
So three
they parachute
40,000 of guys. Sorry.
I was going to say, the Poles, they parachute straight into a German division, don't they? They just get cut down before they've even landed. It's awful. That's just that's like a duck hunt almost.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And well, the thing with Monty you touched on there is absolutely spot on. He was, of course, by this point, he was famous for winning in North Africa. It was a head-to-head between Rommel, the Desert Fox, and Monty, Bernard Law Montgomery in North Africa. And of course, El Alamein, that all culminates with El Alamein, where we win, the Allies, the Brits, really, the Americans, but we win in North Africa. And so Monty was known as sort of a safe pair of hands, but he was known as very conservative, because what he did in North Africa was wait until he had a truly overwhelming amount of force before he sort of did the final attacks on the German positions in North Africa. So he had this reputation for being very, very conservative, actually.
Yeah.
And so Operation Market Garden is the opposite of that. They came up with the whole plan in about 7 days flat. So it was all very quick. It was all very, let's just go, let's just do this. And there's a lot in the histories about Monty's relationship with Ike, about how he convinced him to do this, and all the cajoling that Montgomery did, and how he sort of almost bordered on insubordination, how he was actually quite rude to Eisenhower a few times. And you don't do that. If there's anyone in World War II that you don't want to be rude to, it's Eisenhower, the supreme commander. And
well,
yet,
him or Patton, because I think Patton would just straight up kill you if you were rude to him.
Yeah, with his pearl-handled...
Yeah, he'd just gun you down. Like, you wouldn't give a shit.
Yeah, Patton is a proper badass dude, wasn't he? Yeah, but yeah, so how Monty sort of convinced Ike to do this thing, I think a big part of it was, as I mentioned before, they had these airborne divisions, and really only the Germans had used large-scale airborne troops much earlier in the war, in sort of the Greek theatre or in Crete, when the Nazis invaded Crete. And one of the things I would say about airborne troops is it's sort of a moment in time. They weren't used massively after World War II, because although they were sometimes, I mean, even in the second Iraq war, they dropped a few 101st guys up in northern Iraq, which is sort of almost a bit embarrassing. But the thing about airborne troops is they either work really, really well, amazingly well, or they all get sort of slaughtered before they've even hit the ground. You know, and so anyway, Operation Market Garden is sort of somewhere in between. They were successful to some large degree, but sort of the second and third waves, because there were 3 waves of airborne troops. And the first one, relatively speaking, some of their gliders and planes were shot down, but most of them got down relatively okay on that Sunday, on the first day. But the second wave got hit quite badly with flak. And the third wave, the Poles, the Germans were sort of ready for them with anti-aircraft guns and things. And a lot of them were dead before they hit the ground. And so, airborne troops, it's a dicey game. It's a dicey game you're playing there.
Yeah, I think, they need surprise. They need to catch the element of surprise, and they need to be supported by regular troops quickly. They can secure an objective and hold it for a matter of hours, but they don't have enough ammunition. They don't have heavy weapons. They don't have anything that can counter tanks, because I don't think we had anything equivalent to the Panzerfausts or anything. So if tanks came our way, we had nothing to throw at them. And so, that's why the plan required the ground forces to roll in and, support these guys. They could only hold these objectives for a short time before they ran out of ammo. And that's exactly what happened to them ultimately.
Yeah, I know. Well, absolutely. If we could tell people who might not know about it, the plan was there's two parts of the plan: Market and Garden. Market was these airborne troops, this sort of 40,000, 3 divisions worth of guys being dropped deep behind enemy lines. The furthest ones at Arnhem, sort of 60 plus miles from Allied lines, so deep behind enemy lines. And the other element of it was Garden, which was a mechanized armor, 30 Corps under General Horrocks, who's played by the extremely posh Edward Fox in the film. There's the great bit where he says, this is a story you should be able to tell your grandchildren, and mightily bored they shall be. Just a great character, that Horrocks, and it doesn't seem they played it up for the film either. Seems like he was actually this this larger than life character, and that's one of the things I did want to say about about A Bridge Too Far, is that out of all these films, this is sort of super authentic. They went to great lengths to have it as authentic as they possibly could. For example, when they filmed all these troops, because there's no CGI, it's sort of the late 70s. So there's nothing remotely CGI'd. Everything is absolutely real. So they dropped it. Well, it's crazy, and they dropped them actually over Holland. There's no need to do that. They could have filmed it almost anywhere within reason. But Richard Attenborough, the director, the late Lord Attenborough, insisted that it was all done in the actual skies over places like Eindhoven and Nijmegen and stuff. And all the uniforms and things are completely things. Again, it's only sort of, bear in mind, it's only sort of 30 odd years since the end of actual World War II. And so a lot of the vehicles they used in it were real. They were actually surplus from World War II. And so, it's super authentic. And I love how when they show the Germans, they have them speaking German and have subtitles. Yeah. That's great, right? I mean, you don't get that all the time in a lot of films. I'm sorry, I realise I'm babbling on. I'll let you speak.
No, but it's good. It's, I mean, obviously, this was your number 2 pick. This was my number 1 pick. So, it's a film that we both really love. And I think based on chat's reactions, I think they really like it too. Just a fantastic movie overall, and I can't fault it. Like you said, that the attention to detail, the fact that they had so many people who actually took part in this operation to advise them and get the authenticity right. It's fantastic, and it's almost like, I don't know, it doesn't get that as much recognition nowadays. It's a film that's not talked about as much, and it's a real shame. I need to do a proper review of it sometime.
Yeah, please do. I'd love that. Well, for a start, it doesn't show the Nazis to be completely insane monsters. So that doesn't go down well anymore. Yeah. It shows the British and Americans, but mainly the British, to be sort of quite heroic in various ways. That doesn't go down well anymore, does it? So I can sort of understand why it sort of dropped out of favour with the wokerati. I can understand that. But yeah, if you're not sort of a self-hating wokeist, then it's brilliant. It's just it's so good. Again, I sort of grew up with it. Another thing to mention is that loads of people that are in it were actually in the army. I mean, it's a little after their time. So like Michael Caine was in the infantry. Sean Connery was in the Navy. Dirk Bogarde was there. Dirk Bogarde, who plays Boy Browning. So Dirk Bogarde is terribly English, not to be confused with Humphrey Bogart, who's very American. But Dirk Bogarde was actually there, and I've seen him in interviews say something about how he thought it was. He said it was terribly rum to be making a film about something he was actually involved with. How posh is that? How old school?
Terribly rum.
Is that? Yeah, something's terribly rum. So he's a bit uncomfortable with making a film about a thing that he was involved in as a very young man. But yeah, there's so many great bits. There's one bit in it where, I don't know if you remember, but there's a bit where Michael Caine's armoured division is effectively ambushed on the road. This one road that they have to get all the way up to Nijmegen and ultimately up to Arnhem. They were ambushed by the Germans, who sort of destroyed the first 8 or 9 tanks in this column just straight away within like 5 miles after their jumping off point. And Richard Attenborough deliberately didn't tell Michael Caine that this was going to happen.
Yeah, so, I remember him talking about this.
Yeah, so you see Michael Caine like looking bemused and like genuinely confused that his armoured column is getting blown up. But that was deliberate because Richard Attenborough wanted that on camera, and he got it. And it's just one tiny example of the brilliantness in that film.
Yeah, I remember Michael Caine talking about this, like just saying, I couldn't think of anything to say or do, having seen all this pyrotechnics just go off in front of me. I was just kind of scowling at it. It's brilliant. I love that. Stories like that about making movies. And so, yeah, that was my number 1 and your number 2. I guess the only thing left is your top pick. You're like,
okay,
your final one.
Well, my top pick is Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting choice.
Why'd you say that?
Well, I mean, it doesn't leap to mind as a war movie as much. I mean, I know there's plenty of war in it. It's more of a, well, I guess it's a biopic, but then, yeah, it's about the war, in the Middle East, I suppose. So, yeah, fair enough. It's weird. It never leapt into my head really until you mentioned it.
Yeah, it's World War One. Some people, I think that it's World War Two, but it's not. It's World War One. In the East, it's all to do with, or in the grandest sense, it's all to do with the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, and the Arabs, because Persians are different to Arabs, who are different to Turks. They might all be Muslim, but they're very different, and they don't necessarily like or trust each other at all. And so anyway, that's sort of the grandest thing. In World War One, the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, sided with the Germans, and so they're against the Allies. To cut a long story short, because again, I could speak about this for a long, long time. Could do a few hours just on the life of T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. But so we send sort of military advisors and people from the intelligence services, the military intelligence services, to sort of try and help out the Arabs against the Ottomans. And so that's what it is. And it sort of takes place in sort of the end or the last half of World War One in Arabia and Syria, modern day sort of Syria. Well, what they called Syria at that point isn't the same as the country we know as Syria today. Like there wasn't a kingdom of Saudi Arabia. There was no Iraq. It was just Mesopotamia and
that's kind of what I was going to jump on with there, because in a lot of ways, like people have mentioned this before, like Lawrence as a historical figure was like one of the most influential people in like forming the Middle East as we know it today. With the things that he did in World War One and the kind of the armies that he kind of marshaled behind him and the factions that he created, that really brought about the modern Middle East as we know it, or at least it started the process. Like a hugely influential guy. Just like God, it's a pretty fascinating historical period. Like when you go back that sort of to that time period, the maps of the Middle East look completely different from what we see today, and it's all been reformed in the wake of World War One and especially World War Two as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there was Persia. There was no Iran. It was Persia. There was no Iraq. Iraq. It was they called it sort of Mesopotamia. The idea of Syria was very different to the country we see as Syria on the map today. So, for example, they thought of Syria to stretch all the way down through sort of modern day Kingdom of Jordan and things. There was no Israel at that point. And Arabia is very different. There's this part of the Arabian Peninsula on the eastern side, which is called the Hijaz. Okay, that's what that region is called. And it includes the cities of Medina and Mecca. And the particular family that controlled Mecca, anyway, the Hashemites, claim descent from the Prophet himself. Mm-hmm. And so they'd all been under the yoke of the Ottoman Turk for a few generations, for quite a while. And so some people call it an Arab revolt. That what T.E. Lawrence was involved in really was an Arab revolt against the Ottoman Turk. Now, some historians have said that doesn't really characterize it properly. It wasn't really that. It was more the Hashemites than all Arabs. And others say no. I mean, they ended up getting all the way to Damascus anyway. And so, there's this idea of Pan-Arabism. Is sort of a political strain of thought where Faisal, who later became King Faisal I of Iraq, who's played by Alec Guinness in the film, whom they black up or brown up, don't they? You wouldn't get that these days.
No, that wouldn't. That'd be frowned on.
Brown face makeup and doing a voice of sort of an Arab. But it still works. I think it doesn't really detract from the movie, in my opinion, at all. Alec Guinness is a superb actor.
No, absolutely.
And so from the British point of view, it was, let's do anything we can to sort of thwart the Ottomans. And if that means sort of, supporting Pan-Arabism, supporting Arab tribes, then so be it. Great, let's do that. And anyway, T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, was a young man, and he was sort of an archaeologist, a linguist. He'd been to Jesus College, Oxford, and so he was extremely, bright and a linguist and a historian to some degree. And so he was attached to sort of the Arab Bureau in Cairo. So he was in the army, but he's also sort of an intelligence liaison type officer. So it's unclear exactly. It's kind of unclear what Lawrence was. Was he merely an army man, or was he more sort of, for want of a better word, a spy? But what was he? But it does seem clear is that he was, at least at some point, genuinely on board with the idea of sort of Arab independence. That it wasn't just we'll help the Arabians free themselves from the Ottoman yoke. But then at what point do we give them or argue for their own independence? Will they just become will they just be a British independency after the war or not? And so people quite often talk about the Sykes-Picot Agreement. It's like it gets trotted out, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, blah, blah, blah. But that was actually just a moment in time. That was just a couple of diplomats that sort of brainstormed some things. If you look at the Versailles Peace Treaty in 1919 and other peace treaties that are in the early 20s, they don't mirror the Sykes-Picot Agreement at all. So when people talk about how the French and the English sort of carved up the Middle East or the Near East in the form of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, they don't really know what they're talking about, to be quite honest, because that never really came to fruition. I mean, T.E. Lawrence and Faisal themselves were at Versailles. They were at Versailles arguing for their case. And Faisal wanted to be the king of Syria, which is, as I say, much bigger than our modern country of Syria. And in the end, we ended up sort of essentially making up the kingdom of Iraq and made him the king of that. I'm cutting loads of the detail out here, tons of the detail. But the point is, Lawrence wrote a book shortly after, in the early 20s, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, which I've read, and it's really quite long, and loads of it is about the history and the build up to it. And but the bits that were taken for the screenplay of the film Lawrence of Arabia are sort of, I suppose, the most exciting bits. You know, like his attack on Aqaba. You know that bit? Do you remember that bit from the film? The raid on Aqaba from the desert.
So is that a nighttime raid? Is that what I'm thinking of?
Well, it was in real life, but in the film they have well, so Aqaba, if you know the Red Sea, which is in between Africa and Arabia, at the very top of the Red Sea, it splits into 2 bits. One on the east, on the left, is sort of where the Suez Canal is, and the other bit on the right, at the very top of it, is Aqaba, a small sort of relatively small town on the sea, and it was defended by the Ottoman Turks, but they had all their guns pointing out to sea. You have this a few times in history, don't you? Like at Singapore and things, and the guns of Navarone. The big guns are all fixed. They're pointing a certain way. They're all pointing out to sea because the Turks assumed that if the Brits attacked, it would be via the sea, it would be via the Royal Navy. But what Lawrence does, or Orenz, as the Arabs call him, Orenz, he decides to take this sort of this brigade of sort of mounted Arabs on camelback mainly. He'll take them on a long, circuitous route all up on the interior of Arabia and attack Aqaba from the desert side.
Right.
And it's sort of an incredible, it is really sort of an incredible, almost Alexander the Great-esque maneuver that no one saw coming. And it's just superb, as a piece of sort of military strategy. And anyway, in the film, they have them sort of all, this sort of grand cinematic attack on this town. But the real reality, the real history of it is that they sort of invested Aqaba by night, sort of quietly, surreptitiously, and the Turkish garrison in the morning found themselves completely surrounded and outnumbered, and they gave in. So the real history there is actually quite different to what you see in the film. But nonetheless, I mean,
movies, though.
you might want to talk on this. That again, the cinematographer, it's David Lean is the director, who people like Spielberg and George Lucas and Coppola, they all say like David Lean is the best to have ever done it. Some of the cinematography is just, again, it's superb. It's almost like a painting, isn't it?
Because obviously the desert is a beautiful landscape for doing stuff like that anyway. But like, is there not a scene where Omar Sharif gets introduced, where he's killed a guy who was going to kill Lawrence, and there's just this really long wind up where he makes his way over, just taking his time, before he introduces himself, and the director just shows all of it because he just gives him that build up, he gives him that time to just let it happen, and like he's just this shape that slowly emerges from the desert. It's just a brilliant intro for the character. And just it's Peter O'Toole, isn't it, who's Lawrence, and he's got this really striking look about him. Like he's got the blonde hair and stuff, but his eyes are just like super intense. And like there's so many times when the camera's close up on him, just like, when he's looking out at something or he's watching something unfold, just like these really icy blue eyes. It's an awesome actor and just an awesome performance from him. It's a hell of a movie. It's been a good few years since I've seen it, so I would definitely need to refresh my memory on it. But I do remember it. I know it's obviously regarded as just like one of those benchmark classic movies of all time, and you can see why. Like it's gorgeous to look at. It's an epic story as well.
Yeah, it did really well at the Academy. I seem to remember it was either nominated and/or won a bunch of Oscars. So yeah, it was very well received. It's quite a long film. It's really quite a long film, and in some places it's quite slow. But again, if you can handle that, then it's just superb. Again, it's a 10 out of 10 for me. I think that there's loads of things that were done in that which hadn't really been seen before, cinematography wise. A couple of like really cool little tricks that hadn't really been done before. And it was Peter O'Toole's sort of breakthrough performance. Again, they'd cast a couple of different people before him that sort of couldn't do it for whatever reason, and ended up going with Peter O'Toole, who was apparently at the time a very well-known and respected stage actor, but hadn't really done any films, certainly not any high-budget Hollywood type films. Well, it's not Hollywood actually, but anyway, high budget, feature length films. And so this was sort of his breakthrough. And he's got sort of those strikingly blue eyes and blonde hair. One thing that I would say about that is that Peter O'Toole is really quite a tall man. He's over 6 foot easily. Mm-hmm. And the real Lawrence was really short. He was like 5'4", 5'5". Okay. He was like properly short. In fact, quite a lot of people that knew him in real life that went on to sort of write about him or on record as saying what they thought about him is that one person famously said, "Who is this magnificent pipsqueak?" or something. That was that was the thing, because he was. And one of the things about Lawrence is that he was crazily fearless. That's one of the things in the film. You think, well, it must take sort of a silly amount of balls for this guy to be doing these things. It's kind of unbelievable. Mm-hmm. But that is what really happened in real life, is that people were like, that's suicide if you want to go and do that. If you want to try and attempt that thing, go there essentially on your own or whatever. Yeah. That's just a death sentence. Obviously, that's a stupid thing. And yet he went and did it and survived. He's
like, I'm just going to do it anyway. No, it's like it's
contempt for fear.
I think there's very rare people like that appear in history, and I feel like they don't appear very often these days, and we're probably not encouraged to be people like that. But yeah, back then they were a thing. I was just picking up on the point you made there about it being a long film. It certainly fucking is. It's 227 minutes. That's getting on for 4 hours by my reckoning. That's a movie. Jesus. They must have had intermissions on that when that was at cinema. Because there's no way people are going to sit for 4 hours watching a film. Jesus.
Well, the original edit was, sort of knocking 4 hours, like 3 hours 40 or something. And then over the next sort of few years, they edited it down a couple of times to make it a little more than 2 hours. And then about 15 years later, they sort of re-edited it again to make it the full length that David Lean really wanted the whole time. And it's crazy long. It's like 4 hours or something. And when it was first released, it had an intermission. Like Ice Station Zebra actually has an intermission, if I recall correctly. You don't get that anymore. Can you recall any film in the last 20 years that had an intermission? I can't.
Nah, because nowadays there's not exactly rules for how long films can be, but I know they're encouraged to be as short as possible so they can get as many showings in as they can per night. So you would never really be in a position with a modern film where you would need one. I remember I was watching Jurassic Park as a kid and the projector broke down halfway through. So that was basically an end to the film for us. But I've never been in a film where there's been a proper intermission where you can leave for a while. So I've never encountered it before, but you'd have to do it with a film like this. Generally, though, I mean, I appreciate films that take their time, and it's if you're watching it at home, it's not a problem. You can take a break whenever you want anyway. But I would rather have a film that's paced appropriately, and if it's an epic, it should be long. And it should take its time, and it should, have all these long, epic, sweeping shots, because that's what's needed to tell the story. If it was a tightly paced thriller, I'd expect it to be well under 2 hours, but it depends on the movie, and this is the kind of one that I guess deserves it.
And I think you can't take a movie like that and cut it down to 2 hours and expect to have the essence of it still there. You're going to lose so much.
Yeah, it's a giant story they're trying to tell. It really is. I mean, like A Bridge Too Far, it's just a giant thing, and you sort of can't really do it complete justice. Even given 4 hours, you kind of can't. It's that big, it's that involved, that in depth. And yet, I think David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia does do it some justice. I mean, when you read Seven Pillars of Wisdom, it's quite a long book, and there's loads in it, and the screenwriter had his work cut out for him to even reduce it to 4 hours, even, because it's talking about years of action going on there from sort of 1915 to the end of the war, basically. And it's sort of the story of a whole rising of a people. It's a whole swathe of the earth we're talking about here, the whole Middle East, Near East, anyway. Going all the way up to where they take Damascus, and yeah, so it's just a giant story. And of course, they leave loads out in the film because he was killed in a motorcycle accident. Incredibly, one of these guys, he risked his life dozens of times, crazily so, but he survived it all. But then ended up in 1935 dying in a motorcycle accident.
Really? He still went out like a total boss, though, dying in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah, refusing to wear a helmet.
There you go. Here's the one. People were saying Schindler's List had an intermission.
Oh, did it? Okay.
I didn't know that. I didn't think it was that long as a film, but maybe they maybe just needed to let people have a breather because it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
We did mention Kelly's, or didn't know, did we mention Kelly's Heroes as a movie?
We talked about The Dirty Dozen, but I don't think Kelly's Heroes.
I mean, that's a great one. I've reviewed that on my second channel. Just a great fun movie. Funny, like great cast. Donald Sutherland, Telly Savalas, and Clint Eastwood in one movie. Brilliant. Yeah. Just seeing if anyone else had mentioned them. Return of the King had an intermission. I don't believe that. It definitely didn't in my cinema.
Yeah, I don't recall. I think I saw all three at the cinema, and I don't remember an intermission. Might be wrong.
But yeah, overall, like I say, it took me by surprise when you picked Lawrence of Arabia, but a truly epic film. And I don't think many people would disagree that it's an awesome addition, So yeah, man, I think that's our 5 revealed for each of us. So I got Where Eagles Dare, The Big Red One, Black Hawk Down, Platoon, and A Bridge Too Far. And you had, what was your ones again?
I had A Bridge Too Far, Lawrence of Arabia, The Duelists,
Oh yeah,
Apocalypse Now, and Great Escape. The Great Escape.
There we go. I would say between us, we've named some pretty good movies there. If you guys watching this in chat haven't seen all 10 of these movies, you should put that right, because those are some good recommendations right there.
And there was some great. There's a few great other recommendations by people which didn't make our lists, but nonetheless are sort of solid 9 out of 10s. Say.
I think when you get into that genre, like, because war movies of whatever kind, whatever conflict you might be talking, like, they've been around almost as long as movies have, and so there's such an enormous range of films to pick from. And we were both saying that how difficult it is to just pin it down to 5. Or our list of movies that almost made the cut probably could fill a whole book. There's so many. But yeah, like these have been great. Like, it's been awesome to talk about these. I know that we've still got some super chats to get through. Just wanted to make sure have you got time to do a few more? Or?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead. Okay. Please do.
All right, cool. So there was quite a few super chats I still had to cover, and I don't want to miss any out. So Beach Lover says, watch War. It's a 2019 film with Tiger Shroff. It's a really good James Bond-like agent movie with a lot of toxic masculinity and great action. Well, you had me at toxic masculinity. I'm sold.
That's great.
Mick Lally says, "Can you ask History Bro if Invasion USA is historically accurate?"
Invasion USA? I don't know that. Invasion USA. Okay. Sorry, I don't know it.
That is directed by Joseph Zito. Oh, it's got Chuck Norris in it. I mean, the poster says it all. He's dual wielding a pair of Uzis with a denim shirt on. What more can you ask for? That's peak Chuck.
Chuck Norris wielding Uzis.
Yeah,
I'm on board.
Yeah, that's the 80s in a nutshell right there. So yeah, it's absolutely historically accurate.
Yes.
Chuck Norris is the reason that the Cold War never turned hot.
I can confirm that Chuck Norris did single-handedly win the Cold War. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Dr. Zauerdin says, "From hell to victory, we are fighting. We are the fighting first. No mission too difficult. No sacrifice too great. Duty first, victory. The long motto call of the 1st Infantry Division, Fort Riley, Kansas, USA. That's my combat patch 2 drinker." Nice. That was referencing the big red one. I feel like I must have butchered the motto there, but that's a pretty fucking cool motto. Looney Lenny says, "Just saw Dune. Fantastic movie." Yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did.
The new one, the brand new one?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet. Is it good?
It's good. Yeah.
Oh.
It's got a few issues. A bit slow at times. What else was I going to say? Yeah, it kind of just ends. Like, there's not really a definitive ending to it. Like, I know it wasn't going to cover the entire book. It's like maybe the first third of the book, but it's only really the intro to the story, which is a bit frustrating because there's not really any climax to the film. It just kind of stops, which is a little bit annoying. And it feels like they probably could have tightened up the editing and bought themselves an extra half hour to move the plot forward a bit. But overall, yeah, it's good.
Because I love the novel. It's Frank Herbert is the original Dune novel, and I love that. I've read that a couple of times. I think it's truly brilliant. One of my favourite sci-fi novels. And of course, it ends with the Baron Harkonnen being killed. So I guess they don't get anywhere near that then in this new.
No, nowhere near.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
They got as far as like the Atreides getting betrayed and all their getting destroyed, and it's just Paul and his mother hooking up with the Fremen, and that's as far as it gets.
Really, that's like a quarter of the way through the first book, probably, maybe not even that. It's like a few chapters in.
Yeah, that's as far as they've got.
Right, okay. Do you see the worms?
Yeah, you do briefly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're well done.
Does he become Muad'Dib?
No, nothing close.
Right. Okay. So they don't really get far through it at all, then, really.
Although it's weird because there's no keeping you in suspense with this. Like, everywhere he fucking goes, people are like, "Oh, he's the promised one. He's the chosen one." And he's like, "No, I'm not. I'm just a guy." And they didn't need to work that into the film. I think they could have just had it more ambiguous. But never mind. What's the next one?
I am going to watch it at some point.
I would definitely recommend it. Yeah, see it in IMAX as well if you can, because it's a great experience. Thunderstorm says, "My favorite is an independent film. It's a YouTube production called Jugend, the 12th SS Hitler Jugend Division." Yeah, apparently it's on YouTube. So if you look it up, called Jugend. Stuybeck B says, "I have a good war story for you. Zulu plus Two Towers plus Warhammer 40k equals Hell's Reach. Watch it on YouTube for free and then read a book. You will thank me later. Stay healthy." So Hell's Reach. All right. Well, I like all of those things you've just mentioned. So if you can combine them all together into one movie, all right.
I've jotted that down myself, actually. Hell's Reach. Okay.
I just had to refresh the list here, so I'm just working my way back. Where are you? Come on. Oh yeah, here it is. Enoch Mammon says, "I'm surprised Drinker's favourite part of The Great Escape wasn't the moonshine creation sequence." Oh, that takes me back. Yeah, that was good stuff. Jeremy R. Moreno says, "Drinker, best war movie is fucking Twitter. Hugs, man." Yeah, but that's just
a hissy fit of two people like bitch slapping each other. Twitter's awful, man. Honestly, I barely check it now.
Yeah, I'm not on there. I'm not on there.
You're probably a happier man without it.
Yeah.
Nobody's life was improved by Twitter. Ackles Floozy says, I was never into war movies. I was more of an action girl myself, but Hacksaw Ridge makes me ugly cry every damn time. Fucking hell. And the last video game I played was Leisure Suit Larry on PC. There's a game for you.
It's a blast from the past. Leisure Suit Larry 1. I mean, that must be some floppy disk or something, is it?
That's proper old school, that is. But yeah, Hacksaw Ridge, good film. Cotoid says, I recommend everyone to check out Now Where Did the Seventh Company Get To? And its sequels. They're all fantastic French World War II comedies. Cheers. All right. I've never heard of those, to be honest.
Yeah, I've not heard of
Where Did the Seventh Company Get To? It's called. They're French movies. Apparently there's a bunch of them. Harry Lime says, Hail Drinker, loving the stream. Great stuff. Have either of you seen Cross of Iron? One of my favorites. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Chat's been all over it. Cross of Iron. I'll need to give that a watch now.
Me too. I've got a list of 4 or 5 now.
Yeah, it's building up.
Iron, sure.
Frozen in the 80s gave me $5, but nothing on the chat. So thank you for the donation anyway, mate. Chris Nicholson says, Drinker, for a great but obscure movie recommendation, check out Extreme Measures. Hugh Grant plays a doctor who discovers another doctor experimenting on homeless people to try and find a cure for paralysis. Well, okay. It's outside of our wheelhouse for war movies, but yeah, I'll keep it in mind. Sean Murrell says, is it just me or are submarine movies just very good on average? Even something as stupid as Down Periscope was fun. They are good fun. I love a good submarine movie. I've reviewed a few already. It's just a fun genre. It's a great way of building the tension. You know, depth charge attack or the sub going to crush depth. It's just classic stuff that you can work in.
Well, there's a bit in Ice Station Zebra, to mention that again, where it's all on a submarine and the tension of where they have to dive and all that sort of thing. Yeah. No, it's great for building the tension quite often, isn't it?
Yeah. People keep referencing this one, The Beast, as well. Beast of War. It's set in Afghanistan during the Russian invasion, and it's like a tank crew. They end up like turning against one of their crewmen and abandon him, but then the Afghan Mujahideen take him in, and he ends up helping them to blow up the tank. But it's a great film, really good. It's one of those ones
I've seen that. Sorry, what was that called? The Beast of...
It's either called The Beast or The Beast of War. It had like different titles in different countries.
Okay.
I'm trying to think who's in it. I don't think it's got any particularly big names in it. Jason Patrick, I think, might be in it. Yeah, I think so. But yeah, it's a good film. Jay Coke says, I arrived late, but I think Zulu is definitely the best if it hasn't been mentioned here. It's definitely an awesome film. I do love Zulu. Yeah.
No, it was on my list of almost making the top 5 for sure. But also there's Zulu Dawn. Do you know about that film?
Yeah, and that's the one that nobody talks about because it's like that's the defeat of the big British army, and then Zulu's like the follow-up where they win like a small victory, but everyone's like, yay, that's that totally makes up for it.
Yeah, Isandawana was the Zulu Dawn one. But yeah, no, they're great films, aren't they? Absolutely great.
Yeah, really good. Well done, like well shot action scenes, and really just shows the power of like, you know, disciplined, well trained troops in the face of like an overwhelming force, how they can still win through. Ken B says, late to the chat, did you discuss Zulu? One of my favorites. Man, everyone's on Zulu. Yep, we definitely did. Captain Haddock says, Anthony Mackie from Marvel said once, modern movies are made for 13-year-olds and China. I remembered this because of your chat. I can't believe he got away with saying that, man, honestly. Man, I bet he got disciplined by Disney for saying that, but yeah, he's absolutely spot on if that's the case. Duffy B says, have either of you gents watched Lost Battalion from 1919? The cast was made of the men who were there, including the officer who played himself. No, I've never watched that. I feel like they did a remake of that,
just like maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Sounds great. I haven't seen it.
So it was like I'm trying to think of the context of it. It's set during World War One, and it's like a battalion that takes part in a big offensive. And almost without realizing it, they find a gap in the German lines and are able to advance through it. The Germans then kind of seal the gap, and they're kind of cut off from everyone else, and they've got to hold out. But they become like a thorn in the German side, and it eventually allows the rest of their force to break through and get to them. But like it's just a battle of survival, I think. I didn't know there was an original version though from back in the day.
All right, so they remade it. I see.
Yeah, I definitely remember seeing a movie called The Lost Battalion. Wormy Spoons says, speaking of bad writing, I think the CW have outdone themselves. 4,400 new series. Check it out for your vid drinker. Superman is gay now, by the way. Tangerine. Yeah. The CW is just like, what do you even call it? It's like a fucking landfill of entertainment. Yeah, you could pretty much put any idea to them. It's like, my show's just going to be a guy taking a shit on a toilet for 40 minutes. Okay, it's getting commissioned. They'll do anything.
I haven't really watched a lot of the sort of DC and Marvel stuff. A lot of it, I've just let it pass me by. The older I get, the less inclined I am to sort of even give things a hearing. Like I saw like Ant-Man. Is it Ant-Man with Paul Rudd?
Yeah.
And there was another one of the ones where everyone was in it, where Ant-Man gets really big at one point. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. That's in Civil War is like when they're having a big fight and he just turns himself huge.
That's like the last one I bothered watching, and I was like, I'm done with this whole thing. It's just silly. It's just of no value to me. Sorry,
I don't think you're missing out on much really with this. I did like K-19 though. That Brood in 62 is referencing here. So a Soviet submarine, the reactor melts down or it goes critical or something. So it's like a Chernobyl at sea, and they have to like bodge together a cooling system to keep it from exploding. It's got Harrison Ford in it and Liam Neeson. Yeah, it's a good movie. Really good. I'd recommend that one actually.
That one either. Well, it's called K-19.
Yeah, K-19, The Widowmaker.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so K-19 was obviously its designation.
Well, this is growing.
Yeah, it's a good insight into how the Soviets just didn't give a fuck about safety, and they would just, run things beyond the point of failure.
Well, there's like the Kursk incident in real life, isn't there? Of course.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's like we know that this stuff's unreliable, but we're just going to use it anyway. Richard Shepard says, Saving Private Ryan and Hacksaw Ridge are fantastic war movies. They have some fantastic set pieces and well fleshed out characters. Not going to argue there. We actually, neither of us picked Saving Private Ryan, did we?
No.
Which is interesting.
For me, it is really, really good. There's no doubt. It particularly looks good and feels real and all that sort of thing. But I couldn't put it on my list for... I don't know. There's some bits about it which are a little bit corny, if I'm honest. A little bit about the storyline, about... the Germans are just completely dehumanized, and I don't know. It is great. It's absolutely great. It's a 9 out of 10 for me. But to be in my top 5, they need to really be 10 out of 10. So that's the only reason why. I do think it's superb.
The thumbnail I put on, right, I didn't want to put my actual picks on because then that would give it away. So I basically found a thumbnail of like war movies in general and used that. That's why my picks aren't there generally. And obviously I didn't know what History Bro was going to pick either. So I just wanted to keep it generic and keep it as kind of unknown as possible until we started saying them. So that's why there's random war movies there. But yeah, I almost didn't pick it because I figured it was too obvious a choice. It's like, well, everyone's just going to pick Saving Private Ryan, so I want to do other stuff that is less expected, I suppose.
Waterloo and Saving Private Ryan, I sort of deliberately didn't pick, even though they could easily have made the list.
Yeah. What's this? Novel Brainx says, check out Cinema Tyler's YouTube channel. Got amazingly intricate breakdown of Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket. Greatest war movie, come and see. Okay, yeah, people were mentioning Come and See as a good film. So Cinema Tyler, he's got good breakdowns of Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket, so I'll give that a watch. Wormy Spoon says, my shout outs for top 5 you guys may miss, Schindler's List. Yes, I wouldn't have picked it as a war movie because it's although it's set during the war, it's not really about the battles and stuff. It's a very different thing. And damn, as much as it's an incredible movie, it's not one I feel compelled to watch very often, if you know what I mean.
No, exactly like The Pianist. It's as I say, with like A Bridge Too Far or Lawrence of Arabia or The Great Escape. If it's on TV, I'm watching it, even though I've seen it a bunch of times. Not so much with Schindler's List. You know, I've seen it 2 times or maybe 3 times. But if it's on TV, it's kind of so harrowing that I probably wouldn't watch it again, I think.
Yeah.
But
no,
it's
I agree.
Great piece of cinema, though, no doubt.
Richard Shepard says, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima are also really good and give some interesting perspectives. Yeah, I love what they did with that, like showing the same battle from the American and then the Japanese perspective. Both great movies. It was Clint Eastwood that directed them, wasn't it?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great, and it kind of really humanizes the Japanese as well. Like, kind of makes you understand a little bit more about why they fought as hard as they did and why they never surrendered and all that. Like how ingrained it was in their culture. Yeah, that's really good movies. Really like them.
Yeah, and Iwo Jima is particularly sort of a disgusting battle, really. There's a small video on my channel about Iwo Jima, and yeah, it was well, hell. A lot of those island hopping campaigns were hellacious, but Iwo Jima seems particularly like a hellscape. So, yeah. Great films.
What's the Zack Snyder lighting you're having in your HQ? I'm trying to make it all moody and atmospheric, you know. I could put the overheads on, but then everything will be like washed out and I'll look like I'm glowing. So I kind of have to do this just balance it out a little bit. I was messing around with the lights for ages. That's why they're like reflecting off my TV in the background, because I had to use just a desk light. Never mind. What's the next one? Marcus Clemens says, one of my top 10 movies of all time, which I hated in my younger years because I didn't get it, is Dr. Strangelove. 3 of the best roles that Peter Sellers ever played. You Cannot Fight in the War Room. Legendary. Dr. Strangelove is a really fun movie. Amazingly grim and bleak as well at the end, but yeah, I love like General Ripper and stuff. The names they give the characters. Slim Pickens as the bomber pilot riding the bomb in. God, damn.
I love that movie. There's one character that Sellers plays where he's like the English sort of under commander to the American sort of crazed CO. Do you remember that? And he's sort of trying to convince him not to drop the bomb or something. And he's You know, now listen here, Jack. Maybe we should reconsider this, Jack.
Yeah,
remember that?
Yes, trying to be terribly British and polite to him, and it's like a guy who's about to start the nuclear apocalypse.
Now steady on, Jack. Perhaps that's not the best idea after. No, Peter Sellers was, he's great.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's James Earl Jones is in it as well. Yeah.
I need to rewatch it. It's been a long time since I've seen that. Actually,
he's one of the bomber pilots with Slim Pickens. I love how Slim Pickens plays a guy called Major Kong, and his nickname is King.
Oh yeah, it's so silly.
6 Turning 4 Burning says the Night Witches flew PO2 biplanes. They were so light that the pilots would cut their motors and glide in on the attack. Ah, that's cool.
Silently.
Yeah.
Silent agents of death.
Yeah.
Scary.
That is pretty cool. Gliding in. Enoch Mammon says, Black Hawk Down, aka Ridley Scott's last great movie. Everything after it has been either mediocre or complete garbage. I'm looking at you, Prometheus and Alien Covenant. Yeah, they're shit. But I like The Martian. I thought that was good. Matt Damon. That's a good movie. Novo Brainic says, brilliant film about Soviet women during the war is The Dawns Here Are Quiet. Also, Ivan's childhood and The Ascent will be forever with you after. Man, I've never heard of either or all three of those.
Yeah, me neither.
Right. I need to make a note of that. Nice. All right. They're on the list. Video Williams says, my toughest army-bound college buddy's favourite scene in film, the helicopter attack in Apocalypse Now. His favourite character, Sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket. I mean, yeah, both fantastic. Tough to argue with those. The helicopter scene is just the stuff of legend. Like, pairing that music with that scene is just genius.
There's something about the Ride of the Valkyries, Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries, which is sort of, I think, sort of a little bit, it's perfect, but it's a little bit sort of hysterical. You know, like the female opera singer is like,
yeah.
You know? There's something a bit crazed, a bit mad about it.
I suppose that's what
perfectly, doesn't it? I think with that scene.
Yeah, it very much does, and I guess that's what it's trying to convey. Like they're almost like berserkers. John Wayne says, Battleground 1949, great film about the US 101st Airborne at Bastogne. Early role for Ricardo Montalban. Damn, Khan himself. One of my favorites. Veterans of the action were in it, along with a staff officer who was there as an advisor on the film. Brilliant. Yeah, Bastogne was when they were caught at the Battleground 1949.
Okay, not heard of that either. Wow.
I guess that's the year it was made, 1949. So yeah, Bastogne was during the Battle of the Bulge, wasn't it, when the Americans were cut off by the Germans attacking?
Yeah, and when the Germans offered the Americans to surrender, the commander said, nuts.
Yeah.
In other words, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Royu says, you could... Sorry, I'm trying to read this. You could not be a member of the Nazi Party when you were serving in the Wehrmacht, but they still committed many crimes anyway. Yeah, I'm sure they did. I mean, certainly, I don't think anyone would pretend that they fought a clean war or anything like that. I think it was more just in terms of their ideology. Like a lot of the average German soldiers probably weren't very political at all. They were just there because they were conscripted. SCB Wellbeing says, Blackadder goes forth, especially the last episode. Despite the humor, it was an authentic war series. I mean, that final episode was pretty devastating to watch. Yeah, just pairing comedy and tragedy like that, they just go so well together. And I think, you know, not to blow our own trumpets, but I think the Brits managed to capture that better than anyone else when it comes to writing stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, all the Blackadder series, one of the first things that sort of fired my imagination for history. Yeah, absolutely. I was a little bit older by Blackadder Goes Forth, but yeah, they were one of the key things in my childhood, which made me fascinated in history. So yeah, I love Blackadder. Absolutely love it.
Nothing says, rewatched Scary Movie last night, 10-year-old versus 30-year-old. That's what that means. That was why that joke was funny. Lots of things in there I wasn't going to get being a 10-year-old the first time around. Yeah. There's a lot of movies like that where you watch them when you're a kid and you're like, oh, don't really get that. But then you see it as an adult and you're like, I see what they were doing. I like the Scary Movie films though. The first one was pretty funny actually. I think it's one of those ones that's held up pretty well. Enoch Mammon says 3 classic war movies that are not too many modern moviegoers will have seen: Sergeant York with Gary Cooper, To Hell and Back, where real-life war hero Audie Murphy plays himself, and The Longest Day with John Wayne, Sean Connery, and Henry Fonda, amongst others. Yeah, I've seen Longest Day. I haven't seen To Hell and Back, though. But yeah, Longest Day was fantastic.
No, I'm pretty much the same as you there. And yeah, Longest Day is, again, it sort of just didn't really make the list. Yeah, like, for me, it was Longest Day or The Great Escape. And, well, The Great Escape won out, but yeah.
Yeah. Video Williams says, my two favorites are The Battle of Britain and Tora, 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 both of which showed the enemy as thinking men and in their own language. Both really good movies.
Again, both those are on my list. Nearly made.
Yeah. I really like Tora, Tora, Tora for the sheer like destruction of it. That must have been a hell of a movie to make. I mean, action movies now are easy to do with CGI and stuff, but that was all done with like practical effects and miniatures and stuff. And damn, it looks good even today.
With A Bridge Too Far, that was one of the most expensive films ever to be made at that point. Again, the late 70s. It was in excess of $26 million, if you can believe that. But I think Tora, Tora, Tora was also quite expensive. And yeah, of course, again, no CGI. So I think maybe even a couple of stunt guys were wounded or even killed in the making of that, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong about that. But no, Tora, Tora, Tora is a great one. Really, really good film. Must watch if you're interested in the War in the Pacific.
Yeah. Frozen in the 80s says, Hail Drinker, would you consider Inglourious Bastards a war movie? I'd consider it as more of like not a heist movie, but it's got that kind of feel to it. It's more about, what would I compare it to? It's a bit like The Dirty Dozen, but it's got less fighting in it. It's more about the build up to it, the sneaking around, the subterfuge, people conspiring against each other, all that sort of thing. It's very much a Tarantino movie. I wouldn't quite put it into the category of a war movie.
I think it's more sort of a Tarantino wet dream about what World War II should have been like, rather than. I mean, we did a film with Mauler, Longman, on Lotus Eaters about that, and that's a great one. Yeah, I'd love to speak to Az. Actually, I think he's a very funny guy. He'll have a baby face. One time. I'd love to have a conversation with him at some point. But yeah, with Mauler and that Tarantino movie, I love it. Even though as a history nerd, it's so far off the main beam. It's so far away from truth, from authenticity. But if you can get over that, if you don't mind that too much, then I think it's a great story. I think it's a really, really good film, to be quite honest. I know a lot of people don't like it. But...
Well, it's got some great actors, and the dialogue, as you'd expect from a Tarantino movie, is excellent. And Christoph Waltz is just amazing in that movie. Just funny as fuck, and intimidating at the same time. It's great.
Sort of the understated menace of Waltz. Unparalleled. Superb stuff.
Dayathi Omerchi, sorry if I'm butchering your name there, saying, Drinker, have you seen Letters from Iwo Jima or Glory? So I've seen Letters from Iwo Jima. I haven't seen Glory, though, unfortunately.
Is Glory the Civil War one? Is that the Gettysburg one?
I think it is, yeah.
I've seen that, because I think they made a film Gettysburg and Glory within quick succession of each other. Sometimes that happens, doesn't it? You get two films about the same thing come out almost at the same time. I think that's right. I might be wrong about that.
So Glory, because I remember Pickett's Charge from Glory. I think that's what that's from. So I've seen that part, just like the clips of it and stuff, and it's pretty cool.
Well, Pickett's Charge is definitely Gettysburg. So
is it? Right. Okay, I'm wrong. And then forget what I just said.
Sorry, I mean Pickett's Charge is part of the Battle of Gettysburg.
Okay.
I don't mean it's the film Gettysburg. Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's cool. Derna 1804 says 1 Sergeant York and 2 Ivan's Childhood, 3 The Charge of the Light Brigade, 4 10 to Chi Heaven and Earth, and 5 Stalingrad. Yeah, we never mentioned Stalingrad, did we?
Yeah.
Told from the German point of view. Pretty good movie, as I recall.
Well, what was the third one you mentioned there? There was
The Charge of the Light Brigade.
Yes, that's a great film as well. That's bloody superb. Love it. Again, sort of 70s, sort of lots and lots of extras, and that's a good one. Very slow though for a modern audience. It's very slow, But no, great stuff. Where sort of the whole second half of the film is the battle. It's just good. Yeah.
Spencer Stabio says, will you be reviewing Last Night in Soho, Edgar Wright's new film? Yeah, I'm intrigued by this, actually. The trailers are a bit unusual, but I'm a big Edgar Wright fan, so hopefully it's going to live up to his other stuff. It's Anya Taylor-Joy that's in it, I think. She looks pretty good in it, and she's quite a good actor, so yeah, looking forward to it. True Turner says, war, it's fantastic. That's probably one of my favorite lines from Hot Shots Part 2. The way the guy delivers it as well, it's just awesome. Dr. Jones says, old school, Zulu, new school, Black Hawk Down. Can't argue with that. Both like similar premise, really. George says, regarding NFL content, Drinker, the shipping news and the Grand Seduction, Bo NFLD is massively important in pre-war history and the first English colony. Okay. Munchkin says, hello, Drinker. Have you seen The Nice Guys with Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling as police in the 70s investigating the murder of a porn star? It's criminally underrated, funny, and subtly anti-woke. I've heard about this. A couple of mates have seen it and recommended it to me. It's meant to be really good, so I haven't got around to watching it yet. 0 Hour Discussion says, Drinker, will you review Prince of Darkness? Hail. Well, I've done Mouth of Madness, and I've done The Things, so I might as well round out the Carpenter trilogy and do Prince of Darkness as well. The Lizard Machine says, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Yay. Powell and Pressburger. It's a genuine classic, set pre, during, and post World War I up to World War II. Seriously, an amazing movie. It is a really good film, that actually. Just showing the progression of this guy's life and how he becomes like this old, out of touch soldier who gets he gets his ass handed to him in a war game. It's a good film.
Is that the one where it starts where it's sort of pre-World War One and he's a young man, and it ends with World War II where he's sort of an old general type? Is that film?
That's it.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great film.
So he's young and idealistic to begin with, and then obviously
that is great. That is great.
Yeah.
It didn't even cross my mind when I was thinking of putting this list together, but that is a great film.
Sergeant York says, where does Enemy at the Gates rank on your list? And that Oliver Reed movie where he has to get an elephant across the Alps with a mate I daren't name. Enemy at the Gates is great. I think for me it was in my list of films that just almost made the cut. Let's see.
Is that Jude Law in Stalingrad? Is that
yes?
That one? Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean,
it takes quite a lot of liberties with the real sniper, but the spectacle of it, the cinematography is all really good. Ed Harris is great in it as the German.
Oh yeah, Ed Harris, yeah.
And the battle scenes at the beginning are just incredible. Where some of the soldiers are going into battle without even a weapon. All they've got is some spare ammunition to hold until they find one from a dead comrade.
Yeah, like one rifle between three.
Yeah, basically.
And if you take one if you take one step backwards, your own side are going to kill you. It's like, geez.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, who do you want to kill you, the Germans or the Russians? Because one of them are going to do it. I remember it had Bob Hoskins as Khrushchev as well.
Yeah.
It's a weird choice, but he actually plays him really well.
It works. He looks a bit like him. Yeah.
Adam Young says, Battle for Los Angeles is good, in my opinion. Have you seen the latest Pearl Harbor movie? It has a B-list cast mostly, but gives a solid historical feel. Is that Midway you're referring to? Because I've seen that and I liked it. I thought it was pretty decent. Again, not a huge cast, but decent movie. It's obviously more about the Battle of Midway, but it's got Pearl Harbor at the start. It's pretty good. Battle of Los Angeles.
What's the one with Ben Affleck in it, which is set in the War in the Pacific?
That is Pearl Harbor, but that's that's like 20 years ago that was made. It's a fairly old one.
And is complete dog shit.
Yeah, I mean the explosions and stuff are nice, but the actual story around it is nonsense. Randomity says, Drinker, Platoon is probably the best and most accurate war movie ever made. I mean, I certainly liked it. J. Aaron Packus says, Dead Snow, most historically correct war movie. Dead Snow. I need to look this up. Is this what I'm thinking it is?
Dead Snow. Again. Rings a bell.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Aye. It's a kind of horror comedy where like Nazis come back to life as zombies because they've been frozen in the snow.
Yeah.
I remember this. Bad Medic 6 says 84 Charlie Mopic, an MOS in the army. It's a PA team that goes out, fucking hell, with an LRRP in Vietnam. The movie is from the perspective of the Mopic camera. Worth your time. Also, Hamburger Hill is insanely underrated. There was a lot of abbreviations in that message there. But yeah, Hamburger Hill, really good war movie. It's like Vietnam, but like done in almost like a trench warfare from World War One. It's like such a grinding battle of attrition.
And I think that was based on a true story as well. There's a real hill that they spent a lot of blood to take.
Yeah, they just could not get up this fucking hill because it was so heavily defended and the terrain was awful. James McDonough says, really good recent indie horror movies. You're Next, The Babadook, The Witch, It Follows, Don't Breathe, A Quiet Place, Green Room, Ready or Not, The Invitation, Hereditary, and Fright Night. Yeah, I've seen a few of those.
I haven't seen any of those, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I need to get more horror movies in because I've got a few more days before Halloween and can try and get a few more reviews in. And it'd be good to try and find some decent modern horror films rather than just doing older ones. Gianni Greco says, Drinker, you devilish denizen who's drunk in dubious Dundee distillery. Might I recommend Colossus, The Forbin Project, a 70s sci-fi film that's often forgotten but is absolutely brilliant. You may indeed recommend it. I've not seen that myself. Mighty Balzac says, so short you'd have to dig a hole to kick my ass.
Oh, sure.
John Wayne says, Dale Dye formed a military advisory company for Hollywood called Warriors Inc. for authenticity in movies. It's why so many roles as a military man. There we go. That explains it. Night King 01 says, hey, Drinker, I have to ask, what's the best way to reach you about doing a stream? Also, watch John Woo's Red Cliff, amazing war film.
Sorry, John
Woo. Sorry, not John Woo. He's a very different director.
Right, okay.
Yeah, the best way to reach me, I guess, is the business email address on my channel. I've got quite a few streams booked in over the next couple of weeks, so I'm going to be pretty stacked until that's all over. Novo Branach says, War and Peace, Soviet adaptation is really epic. They used Soviet army in battle scenes as extras, so they're absolutely massive. Yeah, I bet. No, that sounds good. Swampy Gaming says, the scene you're referring to about the prisoners actually happened. I think I'm right in saying. Also, the 80 seconds sat on their arse on their bridge. That's referencing a bridge too far. So the 80-second didn't move, basically.
I'd like to pick their brain about that. I think the 82nd, is that a Son or a Grav? I don't know, but they weren't particularly famed for sitting on their ass. There's a bit in the film with Elliot Gould. Don't know if you remember it, when they have to sort of make pontoon bridges.
Yeah.
Sort of, and the English are a bit reticent, and he's like, "You can try though, can't you? You can try."
Yeah.
It's a very intense bit. But no, I don't remember the 82nd particularly failing in their charge of keeping the bridges open. But I mean, I wonder what bridge he means exactly. I'd like to know. But
yeah, well, maybe I'll keep an eye on chat, see if he explains it further. But what's the next one? 6 Turn and 4 Burning says, you're right about Monty being cautious. Ike was surprised when he came up with Market Garden. Ike also was cautious with his broad front plan. Yeah, I mean, makes sense. Duffy B says, the Poles, I believe, were training to drop into Poland in conjunction with the 44 uprising and got denied to appease Stalin, and they were used in Market Garden instead. It would have been tough to try and fly paratroopers over to Poland
across occupied Europe, and especially in 44, that would be a hell of a thing to try and do. I don't know how they would have made that work. James McDonough says, I forgot Lights Out, Crawl, and Evil Dead. Not an indie movie. Plenty of good stuff if you look hard enough. Yeah, I do need to give more modern films a chance. I mean, Evil Dead's a classic old one. Tommy Keo 7 says, I found 1917 to be boring. The end of Gallipoli had a similar story in the final 15 minutes, and it was more gripping because you knew the soldiers whose lives were at stake. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. The soldiers that he's trying to save in 1917, we don't even get to see them until the very end, so we know nothing about them. Gallipoli, obviously, it's different. You get to know them throughout the movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen 1917, unfortunately. It's top of my list, pretty much. But Gallipoli is a good film. I mean, I'll give it a high 8 out of 10. I think it's very good. I mean, it doesn't make my top 5, probably not my top 10, but it's very good. I mean, It's certainly a great movie.
1917, like I said earlier, it's not really about the story. It's just about the kind of the cinematography and the spectacle of what you're seeing, just the atmosphere of World War One, and really getting to see it from the soldier's point of view. Freaky Friday says, dropping a word for Come and See. Probably the most horrifying depiction of wartime atrocities ever made. Must watch. Let me see this one. Come and See.
Come and See. I've not heard of that either. So many.
Oh, yeah. So, 1977 it was made. Right, it focuses on the Nazi German occupation of Belarus and the events witnessed by a young Belarusian partisan. Right, so it depicts...
This looks grim as hell.
It really does, yeah, Jesus. Well, I want to keep in mind anyway.
Yeah.
Rob Napier gave me £1 British. Thank you, mate. Munchkin says, Drinker, do you have a favourite war movie quote? Mine is, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. Fuck. I don't know if I can come up with a quote off the top of my head. There is a good one from A Bridge Too Far, where I think it's Robert Redford who's ranting at the British for not pushing forward quicker, and he's just like, fine, stay here and drink tea. And just storms off.
Yeah, that's a great bit. In real life, that sort of episode happened in real life. The Americans, lost almost half a company in trying to cross that river at Nijmegen. And when they eventually did it, the 30 Corps, the English Armoured Brigade, said, we haven't got orders to push on to Arnhem. And it's like,
right.
No, we just lost half our company in order to give you the opportunity to do this. And yeah, it's frustrating to say the very least. Robert Redford's character, very frustrated. But sorry, anyway, I could go on and on and on about Mark.
Yeah, totally.
You have to stop me and move on.
Logan Reindu says, did you guys mention the movie Waterloo? Yeah, we did. I've actually got a stream that I did with you previously where we talked about it at length. Is that on Lotus Eaters?
It is, unfortunately. There's a preview on YouTube of the first 10-15 minutes, but the full thing is behind the paywall on Lotus Eaters.
But yeah, you can get a preview of it to give you a flavour of what we discussed. But yeah, it was a good, fun movie to talk about. John Wayne says, I was friends with a veteran of Operation Market Garden. He was an assistant squad leader, 3rd Platoon, 1st Company, 506 Parachute Regiment, 101st Airborne. The sand tables were so accurate, he landed by a haystack marked on the DZ. Damn. That is impressive. Night King 01 says, Hateful Eight had an intermission. Wow, that's cool. It does still happen then. Enoch Mammon says, Ben-Hur is 3 hours and 45 minutes long, not counting the intermission. I personally think it's the greatest film ever made. I mean, it's definitely up there. Like, it's well regarded. Fiery Waco says, Izoroku is the best war movie that you've never seen. It's a World War II from the Japanese Navy perspective. Okay. Yeah, another one I've not seen. Yeah. WG says, have you seen 84 Charlie Mopic? It's a full combat camera movie about an LRRP mission in Vietnam. Pretty good. No, I haven't seen that, I'm afraid so. I don't know. I think we're almost there. Yeah, I'm just catching up on them here.
the provocateur extraordinaire. Good sir, did you see my tweet where I showed you pictures of one of your book's jackets on a Chinese Marxist economics books? What? I'll post a video for you later. I thought you'd find it funny. So pictures of one of your book's jackets on a Chinese Marxist economics books. What? The Chinese declaring war on me or something. Paddy Dunn says a lot of Germans chasing McQueen on a motorcycle outfits in the wire jump scene were famous motocross racers, mostly Swiss of the time. Well, I think you'd need them to do scenes like that. So yeah, it makes sense. Anna Marie Evans, hi Drinker, I loved your recent review of Final Fantasy VII. Back on topic, the long and the short and the tall and Zulu are great movies. Yeah, not going to argue. Yeah, glad you enjoyed the Final Fantasy VII review as well. I know gaming reviews aren't really for everyone, but I just wanted to do that one. MJ Spa says, hey Drinker, thanks for the reviews. You're a great observer, articulate, and of course have a wicked sense of humor for a drunken arse. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Spicy Tuna, have you seen the film Waterloo, old Soviet film that has great performances by the actors and battle scenes that are all done by soldiers in the Red Army? Yeah, we've talked about that. We loved it. Blinken, on the topic of war movies, you both should check out the band Sabaton. Most of their songs are about armed conflict and true stories of heroism. Yeah, I know Sabaton well. Yeah, some of their stuff's awesome. Yeah, they're like... yeah, what would you call them? They're a metal band, and yeah, they sing about like, you know, German, units during World War II or battleships and stuff like that. It's great stuff. I was trying to like watch what I said there. YouTube doesn't jump on me. The Craig Lee Lawrence experience says, did anyone favor Stripes? I miss Harold Ramis. Yeah, Stripes was Bill Murray as well, I think, in that. Yeah, we all miss Harold Ramis for sure. Paddy Dunn says, Catch-22 not getting a mention. I'd forgotten about Catch-22.
Yeah.
I think I've only seen it once, years and years ago. I just remember it being kind of weird. But it probably wouldn't go in my sort of top list of war movies.
It's funny, I've got a funny relationship with Catch-22. I think it's one of the novels I was sort of cajoled into, forced to read when I was sort of just about old enough, sort of 17, 18 years old. Joseph Heller, great novel, but yeah, again, it's sort of surreal, and the movie they made out of it, I don't think really did it justice. The book is incredible, very, very good. And the movie, if I remember correctly, I've only seen it once, and it was many moons ago. It didn't really do it justice. If I remember right, I may have that distorted in my mind, though.
I haven't read the book, unfortunately, so I can't compare.
Book's a good read.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of them classics, isn't it? Dusty Fred's mentioning here, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. Yeah, that is a good film. Yeah, it's a good one. Russell Crowe's great in it. Woven Hellpaw says, my two favourite movies are Das Boot and Midway, the 1976 version. Midway is a classic. Yeah, great stuff. And Das Boot is a fantastic sub-movie. Forge Father says, Gettysburg, an epic movie filmed on the actual battlefield by thousands of reenactors. Cool. Bug versus Windshield, not traditional, but Lawrence of Arabia, true story of a single Brit officer who gets the Arabs to fight the Germans. Yeah. 0 Hour Discussions, horror recommendation are REC and VHS 2. I need to keep them in mind as well. Pete 2 says, here are 5 oldies but goodies. Stalag 17, Bridges at Tokori, Pork Chop Hill, Heaven Knows Mrs. Allison, and The Blue Max. So many I've not watched.
Yeah.
I need to step up my game. Freaky Friday, what are your lads' thoughts on Band of Brothers? Any good? I'm in doubt, to be honest.
I loved it.
Yep. Didn't love The Pacific, but I love Band of Brothers. Yeah, brilliantly staged, great cast, great performances, great scripts. Yeah, the combat, I think some of it was even better than Saving Private Ryan's battle scenes.
And the fact that it's true, I mean, that Easy Company, it's all true. I mean, kind of incredible.
Yeah, the things they went through.
Certain units in certain wars sort of saw nearly all the action that there was to see, within reason. I'm exaggerating a bit, but Yeah, no, they really did see a lot of shit go down. And, well, yeah, I love Band Brothers.
Yeah, it's definitely worth watching. Derna 1804 says, Heaven and Earth, not to be confused with a bad Vietnam movie, is a Japanese Sengoku movie. It includes a non-stop 30-minute battle sequence. Shit. Damn, that must have been some job to make. The Combat Mechanic says, thank you. Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate the donation. Luciano Sebastian Becerra says, Drinker, I'm curious to know if you or History Bro have seen Operation Valkyrie and what are your thoughts? I've seen Valkyrie and I liked it. I thought it was
that's the Tom Cruise one, right?
I assume so, yeah. I thought it was a decent movie. I think it takes a few liberties with what actually went on and how close they actually came to success. But generally, I think the direction was great, and I liked Tom Cruise in the role.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was very good. I'd give it a solid sort of 8. I think maybe. I think it was very good. I kind of really hate Tom Cruise, the man, but I absolutely think he's a superb actor. There's no doubt that he's a great actor. I really think that. And yeah, Valkyrie. I'd watch it again if it was on. I've only seen it once, I think, or maybe twice. But again, if it was on TV, I'd probably just watch the whole thing again.
Yeah. No, it's great that it does such a good job of like almost making you think they could succeed when you're rooting for them, even though you obviously know that they don't. I think that's the market of a good, well-directed movie like this. Zedman JS said, one of my favorite war movies, The Siege of Firebase Gloria, starring R. Lee Ermey and Wings Hauser in Vietnam. Yeah, I've not seen that one. Quinn the Q says, The Longest Day. I had to work hard to make people believe that Sean Connery was in it. He was so young that no one recognizes him. Yeah, he was young in that. He was indeed in it, though. And Willow Wookie says, McQueen will jump the fence this Christmas, finally. Yeah, this time you'll do it. But yeah, I think
it's
we're all
funny how there's
on.
no ramps. It's not like it's not like a Moto X sort of scrambler thing for jumping. It's like an old school heavy motorbike, and there's no ramp that you can see, and somehow he's jumping it over these. Yeah, it's silly, isn't it? But
it's silly,
great
but
cinema
glorious.
Nonetheless. Great cinema.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff. But yeah, that's us. We managed to catch up with all the super chats, so we made it to the end. Yeah, man, I know this has been quite a long one. This is like pushing for 4 hours. It's almost as long as Lawrence of Arabia. We didn't get an intermission either. So
it's been a real pleasure. It's been really fun, actually. I mean, again, especially A Bridge Too Far and Lawrence of Arabia, I could talk for 4 hours about both of those. Sort of the real history of it. So it's probably best that you sort of it was sort of cut short a bit, because otherwise I'd still be babbling on about Market Garden now, probably.
Yeah, like for the sake of our bladders and the sanity of chat, we'll we'll finish up. But yeah, thanks, man, for coming on for this. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. And yeah, for the people who want to get more insight into these movies and the sort of, well, I guess the real history behind a lot of it, you can subscribe to History Bros channel. Like, I've got a link in the description.
Thank you.
So yeah, give it a go. And yeah, thanks to all you guys in chat for sticking with us through this. I hope you've enjoyed our summary of our favorite movies. Hopefully you don't hate us too much because we missed out your ones. But yeah, it's been awesome. And thank you for all the donations. Thank you for all the super chats. And yeah, I guess we'll catch you next time. But for now, that's all we've got for today. So we're going to go away now.